Chapter 22. A maroon mix of metal and magic. It did not occur to her until she was halfway up the steps leading into Hogwarts that it was the week for the magical school's exams. It was such an odd, random thought. Her own exams were not for another month, and she had never taken exams at Hogwarts. But she remembered clearly reading her first-class schedule of her first year, the week of exams highlighted in bold underscore. She had been excited, especially then, at the thought of proving herself. She loved exams, loved the mental test of them, the tenacity it took to come out on top. Each exam was proof of her own self-worth, proof that she deserved the gift she had been born with. That fervor had faded a little in the last years. She had other things in her life that built her confidence. She did not have to see a high score to know she was brilliant, but she hadn't forgotten. If things had been different, this week would have been the week she took her NEWTS. She would be graduating from Hogwarts with her peers, prepared to move on to a job or apprenticeship of her choosing. Instead, she was preparing to enter a medical program at a mundane college, while taking select NEWTS at the ministry-given exams to gain entrance into a basic healer or potion apprenticeship. She never would have imagined the life she lead would have been hers. Not when she entered Hogwarts bright-eyed for the sorting, and not when she left it broken and battered from the troll. Hermione turned towards the headmistress' office, the empty halls echoing with her footsteps. She was alone. Knowing she would be apparating straight to the edge of the warded grounds, she had seen little purpose to bringing Fallen along with her. It felt odd, being alone. Even the students were gone, in one class or another. Who took over transfiguration classes when McGonagall took the headmistress position. Hermione paused at the entrance to the head office, the large gargoyles that guarded the entrance raised back in mid-flight, the passageway open. Headmaster Dumbledore never left the passageway open. It appeared McGonagall didn't feel the same way. She jogged up the stairs, coming to the simple wooden door, where she knocked briskly. When she opened the door, she expected surprise. She hadn't owled ahead, after all, too impatient to wait a day longer for the post to arrive. She should have known better. No one could enter Hogwarts grounds now without an alarm somewhere being raised. Hogwarts was not the same school as it had been when she resided there. She was a much more guarded fortress under McGonagall's lion eyes. Miss Granger, to what do we owe the pleasure? The witch's gaze was a mixture of kindness and curiosity. Hermione had always respected the head of her house. I hope I'm not bothering you. The witch waved a hand in dismissal. I find I have more time at this job than I ever did as a head and professor. Most tasks are delegated. Hermione nodded and sat when prompted, her hands winding together as she went over the rehearsed question in her mind. Headmistress, I'm looking for a particular artifact, one that was said to reside here at Hogwarts, the Mirror of Erist. Have you heard of it? The woman's face dropped into a frown. I have. It's kept hidden for the student's safety. What need do you have for it? Hermione leaned back in her chair, prepared. I'm researching the longevity of various spelled inanimate objects, how any ward structures or charms might fragment or fade over time, especially as the object travels and interacts with multiple people. The Mirror of Erist is unique, and yet also fairly benign. I figure it would make a good test subject for a brief period of time. The headmistress raised a brow. Fairly benign. It's been responsible for more than a couple deaths and several suicide attempts. You do know what it does. Hermione nodded briskly. I have read what information has been written on it. It shows a person's greatest desire, regardless of the possibility of ever possessing it. There will be safeguards in place to protect me and anyone else who looks into the mirror. McGonagall looked down, idly rearranging the objects on her desk as she spoke. I do not see why the mirror cannot be studied, but I would feel better if the mirror remained on Hogwarts grounds, and any use of it monitored by a member of my staff. Is this acceptable? Hermione bit her lip, thoughts spinning. This might be the only mirror in existence, charmed to reflect some portion of a person's hopes, and if Harry's greatest desire was to see the Horcrux reflected so he could remove it, Harry would know, with one look, whether it would be helpful. And if it was, Harry could be done in a matter of moments. It might leave a confusing situation to explain to whomever was observing them, but it would be worth it to be rid of the Horcrux once and for all. Yes, thank you very much, Headmistress McGonagall. Not at all, Miss Granger. Hogwarts owes you very much, more than we can repay. I'll me when you would like to schedule your visit. The day after tomorrow, if possible, Hermione quickly said. On Sunday afternoon. The witch smiled. Very well. Please consider staying for the evening meal. We will be delighted to hear about your future plans. You were one of my best students for a time. Hermione kept her own smile through pure force of will. For a time. I'll think about it. Not in this lifetime. Harry moved as swiftly as he was capable, sweat slicking his skin with uncomfortable warmth. He detested the ministry training for many reasons, not the least of which was the simple physical training. He was expected to be physically fit, and that meant he was expected to lift weights, to run on the wizard's version of a treadmill, and to go through a series of self-defense movements. It was nothing fancy or even advanced. Wizards relied heavily on their magical ability to solve their problems. But there were some creatures whose magic resistance necessitated a certain level of creativity to be able to defeat them, and getting out of breath during a duel was a quick way to die. Stamina, Griff. Ethan called testily, her voice stern. It doesn't matter how strong your magic is if you have no energy to cast the most basic of spells. 4 months of their training, they had stopped trying to trick him with bookwork and complex facts. Duels were swift and rote, mere practice to learn how Winged Horse worked as a team. Instead, Ethan, the captain of the quartet, had found the one chink in his armor. He was physically weak. In his defense, he had never needed to be particularly strong in that arena. Ethan had wanted to give him the codename Unicorn. She had thought it hilarious to name him after a pretty, delicate creature. Granian had voted for Hippogriff, a winged creature that was half horse and half eagle. The slender man had liked the irony. They're testy, too, quite lord-like, always insisting people bow and scrape to them. The name had stuck and become official. Harry didn't bother to argue the finer points of his disguise, just as he hadn't bothered arguing when he purchased the standard uniform of armored Grafwun's skin, a thick, heavy garment that had to weigh at least a solid stone and gleamed with radiant purple-brown light. Everything but his eyes were covered when he wore it. It was a stifling hot uniform that made him bless the existence of cooling charms. He had only balked at getting a new staff, but even in that, he had given in to logic. Ollivander had not been fazed at his request, and provided a plain staff of solid oak with a single dragon heartstring core, both ends of the wood capped with strands of purple metal. It wasn't as powerful as his phoenix staff, nor as attuned to him, but it would suffice as a focus. Enough, you're hopeless. Ethan spoke, but her voice held a tremor of amusement. Harry only cast one glance into her blue light before he let himself crumple to the floor. You need to stretch, partner. Little pain now, less pain later. The words came from one of the two new members of Winged Horse, a large man with a deep mahogany light who claimed the title of a Braxton. He had a thick accent, his words spoken in carefully tutored English. Harry liked a Braxton. The man was not as rigidly aggressive as Ethan was, nor as distantly polite as Granian. The two veterans did not open their hands eagerly to embrace new friendships. Knowing what he did of their previous partners, he understood. It would not be easy to call new faces by old, loved names. Leave him alone, Axe. Let fools suffer. The feminine voice was overly cheerful, her approach a clumsy stumble that sent her to land as a heap on the floor beside him. I gladly planned to do so myself. Thank you very much for asking. The title of this Stral did not suit her at face value. She was as far from drab and depressing as a soul could come. Her light was bright orange, her attitude playful. It was not scary or intimidating, but so friendly it almost hurt to not be able to learn who she was and why she had chosen a hit wizard squad and their rigid, secretive discipline. But on a closer look, the name Thistral worked very well. The skeletal horses were, after all, invisible to anyone who had not seen death, and the young woman whose soul was so bright had a pattern of only loose humanity, its angles not quite solid, what should be square more often circular, a metamorph magus. When he had first been introduced to her, Harry had been tempted to kidnap the girl to run a battery of tests on the rare phenomenon. He was still planning a sufficient bribe to lure her to his laboratory. He just couldn't figure out how much of her personality was genuine and how much of it was a mask, just as the form she had chosen to take that day was another kind of disguise. Look at you three, cuddling on the floor. Is it bonding time? Ethan's voice was like a sharp flick of a whip. Abraxan and the Stral sprang to their feet in quick response. Harry rose more slowly, taking his time. He was more glad than ever that he was only a civilian specialist. He could get away with just about anything but incompetence. Hippogriff, come with me. He saw the two souls next to him relax minutely, only to jump again when Granian barked for their attention. He left to the sounds of their mutual groans. They've guessed who you are, you know. Ethanan spoke calmly as she poured liquid into a glass that she placed in front of him before walking around to sit behind the desk in her cramped office. Hard to hide it. Harry returned, reaching for the glass. A quick sniff told him it was fire whiskey, and he frowned at the choice. It was early for hard liquor. Don't frown. I deserve it after working with trainees all morning. Speaking, she took a long swallow, Harry observing how the liquid pattern of light blues was consumed by her own deeper blue light. It was beautiful in its own way. You'll make a girl blush, Lord Potter, when you stare so. Her voice was amused again, and Harry warded off his own flush of embarrassment with the ease of practice. Ethanan liked getting a rise out of him, one way or another. If he showed any weakness, she would only take advantage of it. What did you want to speak with me about? The woman's light rolled in a casual stretch. You should know that we are satisfied. Granian agrees that you are ready for field assignments when they come. Harry laughed softly at the statement. I doubt the ministry was waiting for me to be ready. They simply have nothing for me yet. I've seen you in a duel. Both Gray and I have heard the rumors about the Nocturne explosion. You have a lot of raw talent, but I still do not understand what is so special about you. It is a political risk to bring any lord into battle. Harry wondered if he could even explain the complicated dance between himself and the minister if he wanted to. A dance of rumor, speculation, and hints of deadly potential. I'm a specialist, he finally said, and she snorted. You still do not trust us. I've seen you break wards. It's a spectacular thing. I've seen you complete transfigurations at impossible speeds. You would be an asset, yes. Other wizards can transfigure fast as well, even multiple human transfigurations at once. We have whole teams of ward breakers. Hit wizard teams rarely require a dedicated ward breaker, as the standard practice is to send in the ward breakers first. You Potter simply are not necessary. You're a luxury, of a golden Kneasel when a plain one would suffice. A golden Kneasel, Harry grinned, and one blue hand waved in dismissal. Forget that. I'm trying to say that I'm not an idiot. Robard wanted you for a reason. The ministry wants something from you, and you're getting something in return. I do not like feeling used or feeling blind. Pardon the analogy. It was Harry's turn to wave away any offense. I'm not sensitive about blindness, and I don't think you are an idiot. You are right. There is mutual benefit for us both. She leaned forward, and he could feel the focus of her power with the increased pressure in the air. Give me something. You are on my team, my responsibility. Harry hesitated before frowning down at his hands. You already know more than most people. I can't tell you exactly what the minister wants from me. As she began to speak, he interrupted her. I don't know myself, but I can tell you that I am here as a gesture of good faith. My willingness to obey the rules, if you will. People are afraid of me. Some of those people are in the ministry. So this is you trying to pretend you're harmless. Her voice was skeptical. Because I don't see it. No, only that I'm a tame creature of power, not the next Dark Lord. He said it with a smile, but saw the pulse of adrenaline that flickered through her light as he spoke. She was silent a long moment, leaning back into her chair. If you can really kill with only a glance, why would you waste my time training you so hard to stay alive? A question he had asked himself most fervently from time to time in the last few months, when the physical training was particularly grueling. But he had his reasons that made the effort worth it. He needed to learn, and no one method was perfect. There might come a time when his own personal abilities were useless or hampered. He couldn't solve every problem by killing or destroying the object or person in his path. He was driven to discover alternative ways to use magical force. That, and the ministry itself, he had to show he could play well with others. This is my gesture of good faith. Harry gently reminded her, an acknowledgement without an answer. Ethanan sighed, light flickering as she tapped her fingers against her crossed arms, adrenaline spiking with rapid beats of her heart. But her voice was firm and strong, iron control in verbal form. If my men are in serious danger during a mission, Lord Potter, I expect to see a line of corpses. No questions asked, no thought of repercussions. I don't care about politics and statements and gestures when lives are at risk. Understand? I do. Harry didn't smile, but looked at her, saw a small woman of solid strength, hair braided into long ropes, eyes almond-shaped and unwavering. I won't let them die. He remembered Flamel's words, describing death as such a wonderful place, but the spirit had been right. The living would not want to understand the necessity of losing the ones they love. Even he did not want to understand it. I doubt even you could prevent it completely, but I expect you to try. Ethonin gestured to his untouched glass. Don't let me drink alone. Harry reached for the purple crystalline pattern, felt the burn in his throat as he slowly swallowed pale blue liquid. He didn't disabuse her notion. It was enough that she knew he could kill so easily. There was no need to bring resurrection into it. So, Hermione began, twisting her hands in a sudden bout of nerves. So, my secret. Harry smiled up at her, his hair still wild from sleeping, a loose robe tossed carelessly over his shoulders as he sat at the small table in the kitchen of Grimmauld Place. He must have been up late again, to only now be downstairs for breakfast. It was nearly noon. Did you find what you were looking for? His words were husky, and even as he finished, Creature moved in front of him to set down a plate filled with overcooked sausage and eggs. She wrinkled her nose. The sausage looked like black bricks. How could he stand to eat them that way? Yes, I did. Hermione took a seat as Harry began to eat, eyes closed, fingers deftly handling his silver fork. Do you have plans this afternoon? Harry's eyes opened, gaze darting to where Creature stood. She noticed now that the house, Elf was standing stiffly, shoulders squared. I did think about going into Diagon Alley, checking out the new Elven Work Company. It opened its doors last week. Creature sniffed, and the pots and pans he had set to cleaning clanged loudly against one another. Oh, Hermione hesitated, then lifted her chin. We can do that too then. This shouldn't take more than an hour. She felt his power brush her skin with a soft touch, his eyes gleaming suddenly with inner light. Are you going to tell me where we're going? His lips were lifted in a grin. Hermione bit her lip and scooted closer, one hand reaching to squeeze his knee. Hogwarts. I found out that they have an artifact called the Mirror of Erist. She saw the wheels turning, the sleepy haze fading away in favor of rising excitement. Desire. I didn't want to get your hopes up. I wasn't sure it still existed at first, and then wasn't sure if I could find it. I still don't know if it will be effective, but it's supposed to show a person's greatest desire. It can be dangerous because she didn't get to finish as he turned, pulling her into a hard embrace, his voice muffled against her neck as he spoke. Oh, Viola, I love you. This is wondrous. When do we go? Hermione's smile grew. How about as soon as you're decent? He looked puzzled a moment, then laughed, standing, leaving his half-eaten plate behind as he moved to the doorway. Do not let him bring home a female. The harsh voice startled her. She turned to see Creature bearing down on her, one spindly hand grasping a greasy spatula like a sword. Under any circumstances, Creature refuses to be misplaced in Creature's own house. Hermione blinked, trying to comprehend. Why don't you go with us? You can veto any selection. Creature is a dignified, distinguished elf. With that statement, he whirled and stomped back towards the sink. Hermione sighed. House elves were matriarchal. It did make sense the older elf would be dissatisfied with any elf that might try to order him around. Still, a little competition might do him good. I'm ready, Harry bellowed as he stomped down the stairs, and she jumped to her feet with a grin. Time to go. Hogwarts lay crouched as it had the last time in his memory, a sleeping purple behemoth of power. He felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, a rare day of sunny weather in the Scottish hills. But he saw only the dark shadows of the wide sky behind the strong golden domes that made up the wards of Hogwarts. Those wards were a thing of beauty, a million strands of light, connected to a being that breathed in days and slept through centuries, each pulse of its heart a season's passing. He saw that single rising pulse as they walked up the stone steps, climbing down the throat of a stone golem that welcomed them into herself with the open arms of a mother to her long-lost children. Hogwarts magic brushed against his own, one creature to another, and Harry smiled at her fleeting touch. The world was alive, so bright and so detailed, every statue they passed imbued with it, every portrait an echo of souls once living, portraits that discussed their passing in eager whispers. Welcome, Miss Granger, Mr. Potter. Professor McGonagall, headmistress now of Hogwarts, greeted them in the interior hallway with polite words. Her light brown soul with its feline echo held a new tint now, a slim golden connection to the wards that had opened for their passage into the school. New security. Considering the events of years previous, it was a reasonable move. Headmistress, thank you again, Hermione said with the same distant politeness of the older woman, who was trying to impress whom. We've set the mirror in one of the unused classrooms. I will monitor your study myself. Hermione had told him, in the time it took them to walk up the steep slope from the apparition point, that the mirror tended to bring out suicidal tendencies in the less stable portion of humanity. He thought the supervision was more like spying, however, than protection. But it wasn't their mirror. When they stepped into the simple square room, Harry saw a length of green cloth draped over a rectangular item of such power it shone through the fabric in waves of red light. Cherry red, bright charms that overlapped one another in vibrant hues. He felt a sense of eagerness when that light touched him, a hint of longing and hope. Perhaps it was not merely weak people who gave into the mirror, but also those susceptible to outside influences. McGonagall stepped to the mirror, pulling the green cloth free so that the mirror shone freely. It was large, at least 7 feet tall, perhaps 8, and wide enough for 3 men to stand in front of it and see themselves reflected. He could see the purple metal that made its frame underneath the red of charms, darkening the outer edges to maroon. Hermione stepped forward first, her blue-violet light meeting the red charms she could not see shining down onto her, highlighting her like a beam of brightest sunlight in a dark room. She gasped. He saw her light flicker in reaction, her light jerking as she tried to both step forward and back at the same time. Then she froze, breathing steadily. He saw nothing but that red light, the angle he was at keeping him from the influence of the mirror. Hermione spoke, clinically, as if this was no more than a mere study. A show for the professor's benefit, no doubt. She described a silver mirror, elegant. She described the inscription across the top, one that matched the one she had found in her own research of the item. She told him there were runes and carvings worked into the mirror, and that its reflective surface was crystal clear, no hint of grime or deterioration. She cast spells, advanced diagnostic charms, testing the strength of the red light and its properties. Then she stepped back and turned to face him, and Harry sucked in a breath. I have enough data for now. You want to see it, Harry, before we go? Her voice, so casual, only the rapid beat of her heart telling him how eager she really was. Hermione played subterfuge quite well. He doubted the headmistress suspected a thing. Why not? He murmured, stepping into that red light even as she left it, facing the mirror of Erist and looking into its depths as it looked into his own. He felt that cherry red magic moving into him, testing his mettle, tempting his power. It was warmth and somehow loving, a vibration of comfort. Then, in the reflective surface of the maroon mixture of metal and magic, he saw his soul form. He wasn't sure what he had expected to see. He couldn't remember any more. His soul was his soul, but different. There was no horcrux across his face. The emerald green of himself was bright and powerful and shone with dark stars, so many pinpricks of shadow, far more than he had seen in the pensive weeks before. The blue-violet of Viola stood beside him, as equals, her light as pure and radiant as it always was, a strict contrast to the changed pattern of his own dark light. The cloak was draped across his shoulders, a length of black cones and white silk. The stone shone from his finger with inner darkness, brighter than ever it had been before, triangular prisms of power. And in one green-black hand he held another impassibility, so much more powerful than the cloak or the stone, the linchpin of the triad, the sharpened point of a dagger, a wand, the likes of which he had never seen. Its black wood with its white core, an infinite twisting, roiling, winding thing that breathed and snarled and schemed. He felt as if eyes looked out at him and judged him, hating him and loving him, wanting to be his killer and wanting to be his creator. I will kill you, it whispered. I will give you time. And he wanted it. He longed for it like he had longed for nothing else in his life. He hadn't known how much he wanted it until that moment. Just to hold it. Just to possess it for a moment. He reached out one hand and touched cold metal, smooth to the touch, a barrier between himself and his desire. Harry! Perhaps if he only waited a moment, that barrier would fall away. Another minute, another hour, another day. He might wait forever for just a moment of possession. Mr. Potter. The stern voice was like a slap, a cold flood upon heated skin. Harry closed his eyes, but the vision did not fade, would not fade. He made himself turn and walk from the room with rapid steps, the purple light of Hogwarts soothing the sight of the combined deathly hallows from his mind. He heard their steps behind him as he rested the hand that had touched the mirror upon one stone wall, the solid strength of the school a pillar to hold him upright. "It is a very powerful object. You were right to keep it locked away," Harry said softly, turning finally to look into brown light. "I am fine now." Hermione reached his side, one hand gently squeezing his arm. "I admit, I had a reaction as well, but not as strong as your own. What did you see?" He heard the hope in her voice that she couldn't hide. He shook his head and saw her shoulders droop. Harry made himself smile, prepared to answer this question before other listening ears. "My family, all together, all alive." He heard the headmistress make a soft noise of sadness and knew his guess was correct. He let sadness show, wrapping one arm around Hermione. "Did you get the information you needed?" She nodded, thanking the headmistress, giving their excuses for why they could not stay for dinner. And for once, Harry was glad to leave Hogwarts and the secrets she held behind. "I saw us behind a podium." Hermione spoke softly, glancing quickly into Harry's lowered face as they walked towards the edge of the wards. "I was giving a speech about magic to the world." So many people were there, mundane and magical alike. Creature was there, you, my parents. It was like viewing a memory that hasn't happened yet. I kept having this thought as I ran those tests that maybe, if I just kept watching, I would figure out how to make it happen. I found a compulsion charm on the thing, subtle but powerfully effective. Whomever created the object had a dark streak of humor in them to not only show you what you want most, but to make you want to keep looking at it forever. Harry faltered, stumbling slightly on a loose stone. He steadied himself with his staff, coming to a stop to face her. "I'm torn between stealing the thing and destroying it." His voice held a ragged edge. Hermione glanced around them, at the bright sunlight and the green forest, a light breeze ruffling their hair. A beautiful day, one she had so hoped would turn out differently. "What did you see?" She hated that her voice sounded so small. Harry reached out, touching her cheek, a genuine smile on his face this time. "I knew this was a possibility. My greatest desire being the Horcrux gone, not just being able to see it. It makes logical sense. In the mirror, the Horcrux was no longer there. You were, though, as beautiful as ever." She felt herself flush, but remained silent. She knew there was more. His hand fell away, eyes unfocused. "I'll show you in the pensive. It is startling. I held the hallows, all of them. The wand was spectacular. Whether I was shown the real pattern or merely my mind's idea of it, I don't know. But it was alive, or not so much alive as aware of me. I felt like I was seeing myself hold the answers to every question I've ever asked, or at least all the answers that would ever matter. It was invigorating, and I wanted it. I wanted to hold it. That might have been partially the compulsion. Now that I'm away from the mirror, I no longer feel that overwhelming urge to search for the blasted thing, but a part of me still remembers that feeling, or maybe I've always had it and have been ignoring it. The Elder Wand. Hermione murmured, worried despite herself. "It's a trap, isn't it? A failsafe in the Hallows. It destroys its masters." Harry roughly expelled a breath, running a hand through his hair, further mussing its strands. "Yes. That's what the story and history would lead us to believe anyway." He hesitated, then continued. "In the mirror, the wand spoke. It told me it would kill me, then told me it would give me time." Hermione stepped closer, fingers entwining with his. "That sounds like something Flamel said. About time." "Yeah." He shook his head with a rueful smile. "Conflicting ideas, paradoxes, that's what the Hallows are. Two opposite sides of a coin that somehow both show at the same time. I honestly can't tell the truth from the lies. It's a good thing we don't have to then. The wand hasn't been sighted in decades, centuries even. It's lost." "Yes." He sounded both relieved at that fact and sorrowful. "We move on. I'll find another way to remove the Horcrux." Hermione said firmly, "I just have to learn more about healing." Harry grinned. "You study healing to find answers, and I study necromancy. What a pair we make." Hermione laughed, tugging him into movement. "We were meant for each other, obviously." Elven work was a squat, humble building of strong green wood and glimmering protection wards. Inside, a wizard and a house. Elf sat behind a desk, playing what looked to be a game of exploding snap. Hermione cleared her throat, a noise that caused a jerk that caused an explosion, followed by a round of curses from the wizard. The wizarding world was always full of explosions of one sort or another. Can Darby helps you, miss? Yellow light barbed and flowed around the desk, then jerked to an abrupt halt. My lord, the elf breathed. My lord, oh my, oh my. Yellow light began to bounce, hopping from one skinny leg to another, a dance of surprised delight. Darby, control yourself, please. The voice was cultured and polite, the tone bored aristocracy. Lord Potter, what can we do for you in this establishment? Hermione sucked in a breath. Draco Malfoy. She sounded a bit like the house elf, her voice a wheeze of shock. Miss Granger, a pleasure. His voice implied it was anything but. His soul, a light grey, shone brightly through spider-thin cracks of shadow. He knew of the Malfoys. This man's father was rotting in Azkaban for life, their entire family pariahs for their known association with dark magics and their sudden financial misfortune. They were not poor, but they were not wealthy either, as they had been for centuries, a fate that could be placed squarely on Lucius Malfoy's shoulders. Whatever the younger Malfoy had been through had almost broken him. Almost. Harry smiled. He knew a strong soul when he was confronted with one. We need another house elf, as our own is no longer able to handle the needs of an entire household. Oh, Darby was still dancing. Hermione was mumbling something under her breath, the words masked in the commotion. Malfoy gestured with one elegant grey hand. Right this way. We have a quick survey to assess your needs, which we will match with the requirements of our available house elves. Harry followed, a quick gesture to Hermione bringing her into step behind him. He could feel her growing ire like a thunderstorm brewing on the horizon. She was not happy, to say the least, with the proprietor's identity. He preferred to make his own first impressions. Bouncing yellow light sprang into the small office with a sharp pop of sound, rectangles of parchment thrust towards him. Here is the survey, Lord Potter, sorcerer. The elf didn't take a single breath in his quick sentence. Harry passed the questionnaire over to Hermione, fixing his own gaze on the grey soul that had sat down behind another desk. Darby, please man the desk in reception. We might have more customers. The house elf vanished in an instant of giddy yellow noise. Draco Malfoy let out a sigh. I apologize. He gets overexcited sometimes. I've never heard you apologize before. Hermione's voice was sickly sweet. He had never seen this side of her before. Sarcastic vitriol was not her style. Not surprising, considering you only knew me for 2 months 7 years ago. Hermione's mouth shut with a click, her teeth grinding. Harry didn't let his amusement show. She was his girlfriend, after all. He would regret it later if he did. What made you decide to open this place? Harry asked with genuine interest. He would not have thought a pureblood lord would be the first one to comply with the new ministry regulations, and especially not the first to start an elven workstation under the new laws. Darby saved my life. The words were frank, with no hint of softness to them. You could say I was raised by house elves. Once I saw the truth of that, I also saw an opportunity. I've been planning this since last December. After I took my NEWTS early, I left school and invested my trust fund in this business. Business. Hermione's one word was acid. One has to eat. Malfoy's polite tone was somehow worse than a fuming retort. The house elves are happy with the work, and I gain a portion of their wages. It is not lucrative, but it will do. Like a temp agency. Harry spoke before Hermione could explode. You find them jobs that suit them and are compensated. How many elves have signed up? Malfoy relaxed infinitesimally. Most of the former stable elves. They have never worked in a true permanent house, and most wish to be placed with families. Then there are those who have been set free by the auras over the last 2 months. Many have been abused by previous owners. Some are physically disfigured. They are ashamed to work and prefer to rent themselves out to businesses and factories on a temporary basis. We have started running an elven cleaning service and soon plan to add landscaping and seasonal decoration services. We. Hermione's voice was strangled, and Harry knew her well enough to know she was fighting against her own logic. It was hard to break bad impressions nearly a decade old. Darby and I, he is my partner. Hermione's light went through a series of gymnastic flips. He hoped she wasn't about to faint. Harry smiled at Draco. This is good work you have started here. I'm glad somebody is taking charge. There was a gap left when the house elf registry was dismantled. I was worried many house elves would be stuck in bad situations with nowhere safe to go. Yes, His voice was stiff, uncomfortable with the praise. It works financially, of course. Of course. Hermione muttered, but there was no heat behind it any longer. She slid the parchment back across the desk. Here, Malfoy stood. If you would wait in the foyer a moment, I will consult with Darby. Still don't like him. He's arrogant. Hermione was mutinous. A Slytherin, a liar. I can't help but think this is all some manipulative scheme. Harry raised one eyebrow. I didn't know you had an irrational streak. Is that prejudice I hear? She elbowed him hard. You didn't know him back then. He would strut around using words like mudblood. He was practically the ringleader of the Slytherins in my year. That was a long time ago, Hermione. A lot has happened. He was just a child. She drooped. I just find it so hard to believe. It's a radical change. Having your father arrested and your fortune seized is a radical event. Draco's cold voice said, and Hermione let out a soft yelp of surprise. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Malfoy cut her off. I have heard the same words every day for the last few years of my life. It is as hard to believe a Malfoy can be honest as it is to believe a Potter could become a Dark Lord. Biting innuendo, some of the politeness gone from the other lord's voice. Harry bowed slightly, searching his memory for the correct words to say. He was not as practiced on his etiquette as he probably should be with his current station. Forgive us, we meant no offense. I know you did not. Grey light spun away, the matter dismissed as casually as a fly swatted away. Many of our elves would be willing to work for you, considering who you are and what you put into motion. You are something of a hero. Malfoy spoke directly to Harry, ignoring Hermione's presence. But Darby agrees that only two would be really happy there. One is female, Darly. She is 91, but still has many years ahead of her. She used to work for the Crollen family, but left of her own volition so that her daughter could take over management. She is well versed in cleaning and dispelling pests. The second is Ugg. There was a note of anger in Malfoy's voice now, short for ugly. Male thinks he is in his 30s, which makes him still a child by elven standards. He was taken at birth and raised roughly as a cleaning slave for a vendor in Nocturne. He refuses to change his name. He is afraid of crowds and very timid. He would do well in a house with a steady routine and an older elf to monitor him and one with no children to frighten him. He knows most cleaning charms and is also trained in defensive spells. Defensive? Harry asked, surprised. Is not uncommon in certain circles. The shopkeeper was not afraid of the law or of his browbeaten slave turning against him. Ugly was used as a guard and as a distraction. Bait. He would take the brunt of any attack and has done so several times. Hence what is no doubt an unfortunate nickname that the elf has claimed as his own. I see, Harry said softly, and didn't have to ask Hermione to know her opinion. After all, Creature has specifically said no females. That left only one choice. What else do we need to know about him? Malfoy's light brightened, though Harry had no doubt the man's face showed nothing of his emotions. He will be loyal in the extreme. He refuses to take wages and considers service to be a privilege you give him. Time off is considered a punishment, but Darby has learned the elf is interested in greenery of any kind, a fairly common longing for many elves who spend the majority of their time indoors and in cities. You will have to be creative in giving him time to himself to enjoy such things without upsetting him. He will try to punish himself, and your contract will no longer allow you to command obedience in any way, even for his own good. I see, Harry nodded. Our set fee for matching long-term employment to an employer is 1,000 galleons, half of which will be refunded if you or the elf cannot work together in 1 year's time. Harry raised a brow at the price, but didn't interrupt. It converted to about £5,000, and for a lifetime servant that asked for little or no wages, the amount was laughably little. Elven work also requires that all employers set aside an additional 5,000 galleons over a 5-year period for all long-term elves to be given upon their retirement. This is non-negotiable. That was more like it. What is official retirement age? Hermione's voice was meek as she asked her question. We set it at 30 years after employment. Due to an elf's long lifespan, averaging between 150 and 200 years, it will be possible for an elf to renew their long-term position at the end of that 30 years if they wish. But each time they will sign the same contract, with the same galleon value, adjusted for inflation. You've put a lot of thought into this, Harry said, impressed. If an elf started in their 20s and took only 3 long-term contracts, they would retire with more money than most wizards set aside for their old age. Malfoy's light dipped in a slight nod. Room and board are to be offered by the employer. The quarters are to meet the new ministry standards. No elf can be asked to work more than 14 hours a day and more than 6 days a week. Due to elf nature, however, you are not required to force them to not work, as this can be considered an inhumane punishment. A copy of all regulations and our company policy will be in your paperwork. There will be a trial period of 30 days, after which elven work will interview the elf and determine if the situation is still amenable. I'm familiar with the regulations, Harry stated, remembering very well how it had felt to vote on them in a sea of colored souls. Power locked on him like he was the main act in a circus performance. Lord Malfoy had been there too, he realized. He must have been after taking the seat from his incarcerated father. You've done well here that I can see. Thank you, Lord Potter. There was both pride and acknowledgement in the other lord's voice. Are you ready to sign the contracts? Yes. Hermione took his hand, pausing him. Wait. She stepped toward Malfoy. I'm sorry, I really am. I should have known better than to assume. It's just I'm sensitive when it comes to the elves. They've been abused as a race for so long. Grey light flickered. We can agree on that fact. Apology accepted. She let out a sigh. Thank you. Ugly waited for them in the foyer. His yellow light was somehow diminutive, stunted. If he was human, Harry had no doubt his pattern would be cracked open like a fallen egg. Instead, the yellow was dim, crouched in upon itself in unconscious defense. Hermione gasped, an indrawn breath of horror that only made the elf wilt farther, the slow beat of its life weary and downtrodden. Ugly expected horror and dislike, but it still obviously hurt him. Harry stepped away from Hermione, approaching the yellow hue to crouch down to his level before letting his power expand and look at the new house elf. The being shivered, long, skinny limbs, still too bony to be healthy. Feet that were overlarge and stuffed into leather shoes, knobby knees, a long flowing garment covering his slight frame. Hands with broken fingers, skin littered with pockmarks and lines of scar tissue. Bulbous eyes in an angular face, a nose that had been crushed. A mouth with few teeth, a missing ear, the other ear half gone. Someone with a very, very ugly soul had let this happen to an innocent creature. Hello, I'm Harry Potter. Master, the elf whimpered in response. Harry kept looking at him, taking in every detail, every scar, refusing to flinch away, refusing to show any sign of disgust. I have scars as well. Am I ugly? The elf's remaining ear drooped farther against his skull. No, master, neither are you. I can replace your ear and your teeth, maybe fix your nose and fingers. In return, will you pick a better name for yourself? Yes, master. The elf breathed in a mere whisper. Good. Harry stood, let his power disperse, turning back to smile at Hermione. Ready when you are, darling. Take us home. Every elf that had come through the doors of elven work had been thoroughly checked over by a professional healer. Draco had insisted on it and paid for much of the cost himself, his funds a poor trickle that felt the strain of yet another burden. He hadn't liked to see their suffering, hadn't liked to see despair and shame in large, familiar eyes. Darby had never shown that despair. There had been shame aplenty, and pain and horror, but never despair. The elf had a core of solid steel, as likely to undermine the threat in some way than to simply give in to it. Draco had resented that at first, as a child, resented that nothing he did, no petty punishment or order could reduce the elf's spirit, as his own spirit had been reduced in other, more subtle ways. But not all elves were so fortunate. Ugly hadn't been. The elf had been a mangled wretch when the auras dropped him off, barely alive enough to care that his master had allowed him to be tortured for money before the auras could take him away. Apparently, the man had wanted to recoup some of his investment in the creature before it was taken. The shopkeeper had not counted on being held accountable for the act. The ministry wouldn't do so, obviously. The shopkeeper had been careful, sly enough to make sure any transaction took place before the laws had officially changed. He had bragged about it when Draco plied him with whiskey at the dingy bar on the edge of Nocturne. Bragged about how the sum he had gotten far exceeded any fine the ministry might eventually charge. He had not bragged for much longer. Draco was still his father's son, would always be the blood and bone of a murderer. Draco knew the ways of the dark, knew more the darkness of Nocturne and what lurked there. One drunken wizard stood little chance against those evils. Draco had not needed to even raise his wand. He had only watched, and remembered how Ugly had cried silent tears from eyes gone blank, in a face too mangled to show emotion. Ugly, who mourned not the actions of his master, but the lack of one, as if a master was his sole reason for existence, his only reason to live. It was enough to make Draco sick, to see such misplaced devotion. Draco watched as Harry Potter knelt on the floor of his building in front of that same elf and promised him healing, as if professionals had not done all that could already be done. The damage was too deeply rooted, the human healers too unfamiliar with house elf physiology. He watched as that same devotion kindled and began to burn again in response. Already, the elf made a promise of something he had refused to do for weeks on end. Magical power licked at his senses, wafting off the blind man like steam from a cauldron. Malfoys were drawn to power, could sense it as a dog senses prey. They wanted it, an addiction in their blood, to possess and serve the deeper tides of magic. His father had taught him their history well. Draco merely refused to give into it, refused to follow a lineage that served instead of mastered, that stole instead of earned. But the power tempted him all the same, and reminded him of times and places he would much rather forget. Harry Potter stood, and that power faded away, tucked safely away somewhere it no longer called to him. The Lord was just a wizard again, if one whose physical features were horrifying enough. The scars truly were hideous when one stood face to face with him in the bright light of day. "Goodbye, my lord, sir." Darby called cheerfully to the trio as they made their exit, the elf bouncing from foot to foot in exuberance. It pleased him to see the elf so happy. Every day, that happiness reminded him that the world was not an evil place. It reminded him that one could survive the experience of being the abandoned property of Lucius Malfoy. That time when all the old acquaintances came in the dark of night to plunder and take what the ministry had left behind. There hadn't been much. Just a witch and her son, and one single house elf, in a house filled with portraits of the dead. There was a reason he no longer lived in Malfoy Manor, under painted eyes that could testify to the horrors they had seen. To best the elf of House Potter, Darby breathed and jolted Draco from his reverie. "What an honor!" Draco sighed, ran a hand down his robe to straighten any wrinkled silk. "Without a doubt, another game." And as the elf bounced to the desk, setting up the cards once again with a snap of his fingers, Draco found in himself a smile. He had made his choice years ago, in a single night of pain, when he first played a game of exploding snap with the victorious house elf who had just saved his life. He chose to be happy. "This is Creature, the house, elf of House Black and Potter. Creature, this is our new elf. He hasn't decided what he will be called yet." Creature ran speculative eyes over the youngling. He had been beaten badly, a harsh former master, but for all his broken appearance, there were strong bones underneath. It took a formidable elf to withstand a life with no house and no true master, no link to magic and power. Creature knew the signs. Creature had seen them before. This was an elf who had not known the life of a true house elf. That would be fine. Creature could work with a blank slate. Creature would teach the youngling everything he would need to be a proper elf the house could be proud of. "Welcome to Grimold Place, our house." Creature ended his welcome with a stiff bow, the movement echoed by the timid form peeking out from behind the master. "Good. Manners are the foundation of propriety." "Thanks you," the elf whispered in a broken sentence, the customary identifying name absent. Creature stalked forward. "Creature will give a tour of the house." The master hesitated, green eyes glowing in a quick look that sent shivers of power through Creature's limbs. Creature held himself stiffly erect. Master had been the one to change his contract. Master had been the one to eradicate the standard bonds of servitude. Creature could have ideas of his own now. Creature rather liked that. It was only proper that house elves would know what was best for the house. It was their duty. "All right." The master turned to his Hermione, their hands linking out of habit as they wandered down the hallway. The youngling followed the master's retreating form with a gleam Creature recognized well. Adoration. That would do very, very well indeed. This Creature's great-uncle, Kellen. Kellen died drinking poisoned wine. This Creature's favorite uncle, Pickler, not related by blood, but adopted into house when rescued then Master's second son, Orion. Piccolo died of old age at 236 when Creature was but a young elf, and this creature's first cousin thrice removed, Kelly. Kelly died killing an ashwinder that was sent into house to harm mistress. Creature pointed at the last severed head, the items proudly displaced on the sloped ceiling of part of the attic, where the master had designated Creature's space. The young elf nodded, wide eyes a smoky brown with longing. Do not know family. The elf admitted. Do not know a house. Creature sniffed. Grimold Place's house now. Pick a name. The elf was confused. Creature gestured again to the long row of heads. Names belong to house. Creature will offer house name to master's new house elf. Tears began to fall, sobs shaking the spindly form like a tree in a storm. Creature waited patiently for them to subside. Younglings, always so emotional. The elf sniffled, beginning to move down the lines again, pausing often until he came to the end. Then he faced Creature, shoulders straight. Kraken. Creature nodded once. His great-grandfather had been a formidable elf, whose face bore many of the same scars the youngling had. Scars of battle, from a time when a house elf was also a companion elf, and would follow their master into any duel, feeding their own strength from the strength of their master. Kraken of Grimold Place, House Black and Potter. Creature said solemnly, seeing the elf puff out with sudden pride. Creature rubbed his hands together, a smile breaking across his face. Now Creature and Kraken will clean. Kraken must learn how the master likes his house. And two house elves, one very old and one very young, shared grins of purest delight at the thought. That night, it took Harry half an hour to do what recovery he could on Kraken's broken features. He mimicked much of the pattern after Creature's own, duplicating it to make ears that were slightly too small, a nose slightly too large for Kraken's face. But they were whole, and the elf cried so many tears of gratitude that Harry wondered if he might become dehydrated. The fingers and feet were harder, the damage such a slight twist of pattern he could hardly notice it. But he was certain that at least Kraken would feel no phantom pain from the previously injured limbs. It was the best he could do, working with patterns. Healing was not an art he was well practiced at, and manipulating patterns in such a way was like using a blunt knife for surgery. Wounds that were old only made things more difficult to distinguish between uninjured bones and badly healed ones. You did the best you could, Hermione said softly, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea between them. He looks worlds better, not so shocking. I want to go back to that office and find out what shopkeeper did that to him. I want to give that elf some form of retribution. Hermione's light pulsed, her voice soft. I already asked, while you were talking with Kraken in the foyer. Harry's power rose as he looked at her, focusing entirely on the lines of stress upon her face. Who? Hermione's lips moved in a rueful smile, his magic outlining the motion with green color. Draco Malfoy might be reformed, but he's still a Slytherin. When he told me he took care of it, I imagine he did far worse in far more creative ways than we could come up with. Harry let his look fade, leaning back in his chair with a reluctant, satisfied smile. Good. She shifted, light wavering from side to side. I don't understand why he decided to champion house elves. How someone can change so much, fall so far away from the family reputation. He still seems so cold, so pure-blooded. You heard the way he spoke. He was dressed in robes that probably cost a fortune, and we caught him playing Exploding Snap with a house elf of all beings. Harry frowned down at the table, following the green pattern of the long dormant wood as he thought. He has been through a great deal of trauma. He looks like a window that came close to shattering, an entire spiderweb of cracks running along the seams of his pattern, not broken but battered. The kind of beating that takes place over years of stress, years of psychological torment. If it had been one single thing, the damage would look different, more central, like with your cousin. He said Darby saved his life. He might not have meant physically. If house elves were the only ones to show him kindness, his behavior makes a great deal more sense. Until now, with the reforms, he might just have not had an outlet. I doubt his father would ever have allowed him to show any kind of weakness, and to a dark wizard, caring about inferior beings and people is weak. Hermione groaned. I feel like I need to apologize all over again. I've never acted so irrationally. You would think I had been faced with Ronald Weasley. It wasn't even Draco himself I wanted to tear apart, but everything I thought he stood for. I don't like being wrong. Harry straightened, beginning to smile. Can I make you feel better? Hermione let out a short laugh, rising herself. We don't have time. Who says? Harry took one step to the side, a motion she mirrored in the opposite direction. His eyes narrowed at the challenge. My parents, Hermione replied, but he heard the humor in her voice. The ones who set a curfew so they wouldn't stay up and worry. A very, very reasonable curfew of midnight. Harry nodded his head slowly, saw her light begin to relax. Then he set one hand upon the wooden table and sprang over it, rejoicing in the newfound flexibility the ministry training had given him. He caught her startled form in a bear hug, pressing her back against the kitchen cabinet, laughing into her mouth. We have time. Harry panted, pulling back from a kiss. Consider it an experiment in expediency, economy of motion, bedroom science. She laughed, her hands slipping underneath his shirt. Harry James Potter, who taught you to be so convincing. My greatest teacher, of course. She seduced me first, you know, dragged me off to bed, wouldn't take no for an answer. Hermione giggled, her blue-violet light alive with joyful life. And together they stumbled into the hallway and towards the stairs, unaware of the two sets of elven eyes that watched them go. The master does this often. Creature said with the practiced calm of a servant who had seen everything at least a dozen times in his long service. Simply gather any loose clothing and set it, folded, inside the master's chamber. Be silent and discreet. Crocken will, the younger elf replied solemnly. With that said, the two walked into the kitchen and purposefully ignored the sounds above of a sudden crash followed by wild, buoyant laughter. We have taken the first step, wizards and witches of Britain. We have given one race their freedom. But why stop now? Why stop now, indeed? Albus Dumbledore said to himself with a smile. I think I would like to meet this woman. He flipped the page over, the title of the venerated and mysterious Transfiguration and Magical Theorist's newest paper written in bold. We all have souls. Magic tells us so by Viola James. A very good thing no one knows who you are, Miss James. The ministry would very much like to get their hands on you right about now. The former headmaster smiled into his fire, the phoenix resting on its perch singing a gentle song, thinking upon the carefully worded paragraphs, a masterpiece of hints and threats and sophisticated genius. If the only thing that sets humankind above the other magical species is a soul, then we have been greatly misled. Are not werewolves first human? Can Vila, goblins, vampires, giants, and trolls not have offspring with humankind? There is no such thing as being born with half a soul. One has one, or one does not. A soul is a magical person's greatest treasure. Who would say that a human soul is worth more than any other magical being's? Has not magic itself shown us that each and every soul is a powerful thing in its own right? So I ask myself this question. I ask you this question. Why do we treat, as a nation, certain citizens as inferior to ourselves, if underneath the skin and bone and blood we all bear the same, equally powerful soul? Griff, long time no see. This Stral called out, all cheerful surprise. It's only been a week. Harry grinned. Was having the sole attention of your captain that gruesome? Absolutely. The woman clapped one hand on his shoulder, her light bouncing with energy. Axe and I were surprised when we heard you wouldn't be joining us every day anymore. They figure you've been whipped into shape. Something like that. Harry glanced around the empty training room. Just once a week now for review. We went on our first assignment as a group yesterday. The Stral leaned forward, her voice an excited hiss. Had to tackle an illegal potions dealer outside this small rural village. The man had monster blast-ended scroots. Grainy and got second-degree burns all over his face when one of those things freaking exploded. Man had them set up like an alarm ward. He would have made it out if we hadn't put up the standard anti-portkey ward. What kind of potions? Harry asked, and she let out a sigh. Bad stuff. Some of it was standard dark fare, pain givers and skin boilers, that type of thing. Some nasty poisons made to be painful, others meant to kill covertly. But the worst was the rose of a mortentia with a particularly sick twist. It was flavored like candy, dried and put in these bright-colored muggle tubes. It didn't take Harry more than a second to figure out why someone would want to take a powerful love potion and make it attractive for young children. He felt sick at the thought. Bastards. He grunted, and the Stral agreed with a curse of her own before continuing. Our guy didn't make them, though. He was just a dealer. The auras are going to try and crack him wide open, figure out the source. It's a nest of vipers in the underground black market, but children, well, some are out for money, and some are out for power. Not many trade in flesh, not in Britain. We'll find them. Harry observed her orange soul, its color a bright mix between the shade of Tangelo and Pantone. She was bubbling with adrenaline just talking about the day before. Why did you decide to become a hit wizard instead of an aura? He wanted to take the question back as soon as he asked it, knowing that secrecy was important, especially in their own branch of law enforcement. But the Stral only shrugged. I wanted to help people, and metamorph magus are rare. I had a choice between the two, and they would have been glad to take me either way. But with the people we deal with, pureblood supremacists and dark wizards, having any half-blood or muggle ancestry can be dangerous. Not just for you, but for your family. I liked the idea of not having to worry about work following me home. She laughed, but the sound was also sad. The pay is better, too. I understand. Harry agreed, pausing for a moment before deciding to forge ahead. You know who I am? The woman went still, her voice hesitant. I've seen your picture in the paper. Your looks are unique, to say the least. Yes. Well, I've been contemplating how to protect my own family. I've hired guards for private security, and I've warded their homes. But guards can only go so far, and wards as well for that matter. How much do you know about Muggle weaponry? My father's a Muggle-born. His dad was in Muggle law enforcement. I don't know much about it, though. It was more personal information that Harry expected to gain. He nodded. I've been considering ways to merge self-defense spells into an item that can be used by non-magical people, like bullets in a Muggle gun, but with spells instead. A way for them to protect themselves until help can be summoned. It sounds brilliant. She began, waving one hand as she spoke. This Stral always seemed to be in motion, and like political suicide, the Ministry is not going to let you put magic in the hands of Muggles. There is the statute to consider. Her tone was a warning. Harry smiled politely. Family members are already exempted from the statute. They can have flues and portkeys and magical books, can even have a subscription to the Daily Prophet. What difference would it be for them to have, say, a wand preloaded with Petrificus totalis? She sucked in a breath, then laughed. You are a real fox, Griff. I'd like to see you argue that line of logic in the Weisengammer when you're on trial. I'll make sure you're present. Harry returned, sharing her laughter. When Granian and Abraxan entered, the subject was dropped. But when the training session was over, the Stral whispered in his ear as he made to leave. I know some people who might be able to help with your little idea. Inventors, like. You want me to feel them out? Harry's smile couldn't be contained. Inventors. He echoed her own word from their previous conversation, giving it the same fervent lilt. Absolutely. Chapter 23. A Tapestry of Bronze and Copper. Here, Griff. The Stral's bright orange pattern pulsed with excitement as she pressed green parchment into his hand the next week. It's their store, what we talked about. You didn't hear about them from me. Harry grinned at the hit wizard, pushing the scrap into his robe. Thanks. He saw her loose pattern morph and change, growing taller and thinner, more thickly masculine. Then she sighed. It doesn't have the same punch when you can't see the effect. Nothing at all. Harry ran his eyes over her, or should it be his, soul. The Stral's unique light gleamed as bright as ever, a solid shade in a changing pattern of humanity. He took an educated guess. You're male now, she groaned, her voice deeper when she spoke. I'm your twin, Merlin. How can you manage to get around on your own? There was both teasing and open curiosity in her tone. He shrugged. I see no difference between female and male people, besides what can be assumed from their general size and shapes. The tone of voice gives more away, with lower masculine registers and higher feminine ones. He paused. You don't talk like me. The Stral's pattern shifted again, reverting to the almost petite form she seemed to prefer for hit wizard training. Got to practice inflection and the like, accents, personality. Getting the same voice box doesn't make you sound the same automatically. Polyjuice works the same, which is why auras are taught observation techniques. Ethonin approached, her vibrant blue light a forceful beacon. Speech patterns are the only definite way to recognize someone under polyjuice. That, and interrogation while waiting out the potion. Harry nodded, filing away the information beside his own observations. Metamorph magus. seemed to manipulate the humanity alone of their patterns, while what little he had seen of Crouch Jr. told him that polyjuice was effective on a deeper level to the point of assimilation and mimicking portions of a person's soul. Perhaps it was because of the hair inside the potion, a type of genetic imprinting. But if that was true, would that mean that a soul stamped part of its signature color on the body it inhabited? And if so, why did the body fade to white when the soul left it? Why did blood carry the color of its body's soul, when the body seemed independent of the soul, capable of dying while the soul, nearly immortal, faded away to resurrection? Hippogriff stopped daydreaming. Ethan said, very much unamused with his distraction. He shook off the constant questions, faced his captain, and nodded. It was time for another morning of practice. The Weasleys are a big but poor, pureblood family. Vaughn began musingly, Bangladesh green reclining on the large couch in Grimmauld Place. Always have been, for as long as I'm aware. Not a lot of money to spare between them all. A couple tend to go into government every generation. The patriarch, Arthur Weasley, is the current head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Department. One son works in the minister's office, trying to muscle in on an assistant position. Probably will succeed, seems driven enough. Another son, the eldest, works for Gringotts, and another on a dragon reservation in the Mediterranean. Rumor abounds that the youngest son just got refused a position in the Auror Academy. Ron, Harry murmured softly. The werewolf. Green shifted side. It's the law no matter who you are. It seems to matter very much who you are. Harry countered, then waved a hand in dismissal. You know a lot about them. I got around as an Auror, worked under Mr. Weasley myself for a couple months. I still go to the same pub as most of my old buddies. I hear the talk. Many weren't happy they turned away a hero of Hogwarts. And Fred and George. Harry gestured to the green parchment, the one that mentioned a new store that had opened in Diagon Alley, one that had grown very popular very quickly. Vaughn lifted a cup to his mouth, sipped the hot liquid. Hogwarts dropouts. Harry coughed out a laugh. What? Vaughn chuckled, but the humor was muted. Left in the middle of their 7th year, only months before graduation. Some say the death of their little sister a few years back messed them up. They had always liked playing jokes, but in the time since the tragedy, those jokes started having a more malevolent edge. They got warned by Lord Dumbledore, and next thing Weasley knows, his sons are showing up on his doorstep with all of their things. The entire department was aflutter with the gossip when it happened. Weasley has a reputation as a mild, congenial man. Those two twins, though, rumor is they got their mother's prowit temper. Smart as a sphinx, passed their NEWTs during the ministry's quarterly tests, got apprenticeships in Diagon, and ran a side owl-post business for their inventions until they started up their own storefront joke shop a year ago. It's been an unrivaled success. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Harry quoted. That's the one. A cool mix of blue and green waved toward the parchment Harry had lain on the small table before restarting the conversation. Why the sudden interest? Thinking of making an investment, I've heard rumors they are open to a silent partner. Of a sort. Harry filed that information aside as well. We're going there tomorrow morning. I would like to speak with one or both of them. I'll be ready, my lord. A subtle dig. The guard knew Harry disliked the title. It was a common discussion between them. Harry, what did you call me? Vaughn's faux offended tone made him laugh. I'm sorry, that's right. Harry paused, letting his teeth show in a wide smile. Hermione told me you're bald. My apologies. Didn't mean to point out your lack of follicle capability. A moment of silence. Then the guard barked out a laugh of his own, light jerking with a shake of his head. I'm not bald. I shave. It's all right. Harry began, unable to hide his grin. You don't have to defend yourself to me. I understand disabilities. With that last pedantic word, the ex-Auror rose to his feet. Those are dueling words, my lord. Amused violence. Thrilled, Harry rose to his own feet. But before he could even begin to reach for his power, another voice spoke, this one decidedly not thrilled. The master will not duel in the living room of the house. Yellow light, short and angry. Harry wilted at his house elf's words. Creature had not spoken to him for days after the last incident that had broken several priceless black trinkets and rendered 2 family portraits into pieces. All repairable damage, thankfully, or his head elf might have mutinied. Some other time, Harry said meekly. a sentiment echoed by an equally repentant Vaughn. After all, the guard was not master nor family of the house. He had suffered a cup of tea laced with a particularly embarrassing substance that put him out of work for 2 days. Just where and how Creature had obtained a fungiface potion he had never discovered. But no one could claim house elves were not resourceful or imaginative. Harry had seen twins before. Years ago, he had catalogued the differences between fraternal and identical ones and made his own conclusions. Fraternal twins appeared to be two completely separate individuals. Identical twins tended to display soul colors only a shade different from one another, a subtle difference that hinted at close personalities and bonds, but still two very unique individuals all the same. But he hadn't seen magical twins yet, not close enough to make observations. So it took him a moment to recognize what he was seeing as he faced the counter of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, where two patterns stood side by side, helping a short wizarding child of pale grey as he made his purchases. Two souls, their human patterns identical, their colors threaded through with one another in a tapestry of bronze and copper. Together they were a marvelous work of art, a wild tangle of brown and orange color that was both beautiful and mesmerizing, his eyes following the vibrant shades as they rippled with movement. One bore the brunt of a copper soul, pale orange and brown, the other mostly bronze, a darker brown with its flecks of palest orange. Or perhaps one was brown, the other orange, and the unique metallic color formed from the merging of the two souls at some point in their lives. Had magic done this to them? Did magic allow two souls to bond more completely inside a womb than any familiar bond he had seen? Or had something simply went wrong with the resurrection process, two souls confused into inhabiting two bodies together? Could they communicate mentally, share thoughts as they shared souls, share magic and strength, and share pain and joy? The moment he thought he understood the composition of souls, he encountered something unique. It invigorated him, a sharp poke in his back, and bringing him back to himself. The grey child had moved on, and it was his turn to approach. Copper stepped away from Bronze, held out one hand. Lord Potter, right on time. Jovial words, though Harry did not miss the gleam of magic on the hand held towards him. I don't think it's safe to shake your hand, he murmured, and the hand withdrew with a laugh that held a dark edge. A simple prank. You don't miss much, do you? A flicker of copper bronze magic. I'm Fred Weasley, this is. George Weasley. The bronze light finished. He'll take you to the back while I close the shop for lunch. Dutifully, Harry followed Fred, Vaughn stepping back without prompting to peruse the now empty store. When they sat, he felt himself being studied with the focus of two consciousnesses, not just the one in the room. So, what does the blind sorcerer want with us? We didn't know what to make of your owl. It was quite the surprise. Bronze light entered the room, joined Copper on the couch in what must be the break room lounge area. I was told you were inventors. I have an idea I want to pursue, one I do not yet have the time or skill to follow myself. We're all ears. They said together, their inflections the same, down to the last raised syllable. Practice or something more. Preloaded wands with defensive spells. The type that can be used by those unable to cast spells on their own in a hostile situation. Squibs or muggles. Is there a difference? Harry mused, saw the flicker of their hearts. The ministry thinks so. Fred said, but there was no censure in his voice, only the rising excitement of the challenged. Harry smiled. I'm sure such a wand could be used for anything by anyone. Why would you be punished for creating something that another person misused of their own volition? George this time, brown with those threads of shining copper. Historically, the ministry punishes both the creator and the user. But hummed into the silence, Fred picking up the conversation after a moment. A focus. A stone, perhaps, or a cube of wood made to hold magical power. Select words that could trigger that magic's release. Words to bind or shield. Market it as a child's safety feature. George again, continuing on the thought, both brothers trading words. A necklace, even decorative. Something a protective, loving parent might give their child. Why would the ministry bother with such a thing? Won't hold much power. Won't need to if it's an emergency situation. Enough time to escape. Enough time to summon help. Like a ward stone runic type. A knot of wood woven of ash or holly. 3 to 5 spells max recharge ability. For a fee, of course. Silence, and Harry was again their focus. We'll do it. They said together, more words unsaid in the air between them, What else is in it for us? I'll send 1,000 galleons up front in good faith for your effort. I'll pay for the hours it takes to make a prototype and finalize the product. In return, I'll expect a small percentage of any profits as a royalty and a discount for my own purchases. Our business does well. Bronze and copper spoke. If such investments are in your interest. Vaughan was a credible source indeed. Perhaps Harry should pay for the man's drinks at the pub he frequented. They might be. I'm very interested in what you make of the protective necklaces. He heard the smiles in their voices, felt their combined power like a heavy pressure in the room. Here were two powerful souls indeed, the kind that a vampire might find painfully desirable. We're the best at what we do. And as Harry turned to leave, his gaze still trained on where their souls entwined in layers of copper and bronze, he had the good feeling he would shortly agree with them. I'm so sorry. Neville said the words softly into the silent kitchen. It was early afternoon, the Weasley house oddly silent from its normal bustling activity. When Ron asked for space, his eyes gleaming with golden intensity, he was given it. But before she left, Mrs. Weasley had contacted Neville through the flu with the morning's events. Ron raised his head, hair a mess, face drawn into sorrowful lines. Any anger, it seemed, had already fled along with his family. I made O's. You know how hard I worked for them. Even made the old bat Snape let me into advanced potions. I got a tutor. I did everything. I didn't let how tired I was after the moon stopped me, didn't give up. Didn't let McGonagall talk me out of it. I wanted this. I wanted to help people, do the same things we did in Hogwarts when everything goes to hell. Fight. I would be a bloody good aura. And they turned me down. Me, a hero of Hogwarts. Not even given a reason, as if I don't know why anyway. Of course I know. Should have listened to McGonagall after all. Neville let the words flow, poison in every syllable. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. They had both known this was a possibility, but they had also both dared to hope that Ron's own reputation might give him special compensation. But the Ministry would not suffer a werewolf to have any job at all with the public, and especially not one in law enforcement. One night a month. One single, bloody night, and it has ruined my life. What do I do now? Get a job as a janitor, sweep the streets of Diagon now that house elves are in short supply. My family will bankrupt themselves trying to afford Wolfsbane. Neville shifted, sitting down softly across from his friend, trying to think of the right words. Your brothers. They've already offered. They don't have a high opinion of the Ministry anyway. Their joke shop is doing well enough they can hire another employee. But they need a clerk, not a criminal who can only work after closing hours. You're not a criminal, Neville stated firmly. Ron looked up from his study of his two scarred hands, brown eyes dull, the characteristic Weasley fire missing. I am. I'm being punished for the crime of being what I am. No one wants me around. No one wants to be tainted with my presence and what I represent. A mindless, murderous beast. That's what they see when they look at me. I can never be anything else. Neville slammed one fist onto the table, the sound only louder for the silence around them. He didn't get angry very often, but he was angry now. Snap out of it, mate. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Fight back. Challenge the laws. How? Ron spat back. I'm just one person. I don't even know enough other werewolves to try to get support. Neville lifted his chin. I know one person who would support you. You need to read an article that came out in last week's Daily Prophet. This witch, the same one who wrote those articles on house elves, she put out another paper. She mentioned werewolves. You should write to her, explain. Maybe something can come of it. Someone needs to take a stand. Neville paused, eyes narrowed. And maybe it's time I took up my own seat on the Wisengamot. If a Potter can lobby for house elves, then a Longbottom can do the same for werewolves. Ron's mouth opened, then snapped closed when he could think of nothing to say. He just shook his head, and Neville began to smile. He had managed to strike a Weasley speechless. I'm going to do it. At June's meeting, my grandmother told me she was getting tired of politics. She would be proud of me for taking a stand in this. She has never treated you differently for being a werewolf. Neville. Ron shook his head again, then laughed. No one is going to want to associate with someone that represents a dark creature. The Longbottoms are a light family. Your family's reputation is useless if you can't help family. Neville finished. Now we've got 2 months to prepare. No need to waste time. Where does your mum keep the parchment? Ron sat for a long minute, judging the stubborn tilt of his best friend's face. Then he began to rise, still incredulous. "I'll get it. Master Potter, the flu." Kraken's young voice woke Harry from where he rested partially underneath the cloak, sprawled across his laboratory floor on a nest of conjured pillows. He had been meditating, testing his occlumency skills, and found the silence and comfort of his own space convenient, until he had fallen asleep. Then, even with the pillows, it was quite uncomfortable. Harry sat up, looking towards the door where Kraken stood, his skinny form beginning to put on weight until he no longer looked quite as skeletal as he had. The elf bowed, one hand over his chest, the other behind, an elaborate, elegant gesture, one he had not yet seen the elf use. Creature was taking his mentoring task very seriously. "The flu, Master Potter. The wizard says it is important." Harry rose, withdrawing his power to let the natural light glimmer around him as he attempted half-heartedly to straighten the wrinkles from his clothing. A wash of yellow light, and he could feel his clothing rustle with the distinct scent of lavender. House elf charms. Perfect. "Thank you," Harry said, moving towards the door, receiving another slightly awkward bow in response. Kraken took his learning seriously as well. After the first week, Harry had stopped trying to influence either house, elf on matters of etiquette. If Creature wanted formal, Creature was going to get it. When he reached the fire, its normal red glow was shining with white light and shaped into a human pattern, one that spoke in Gerald Robard's voice. "You're needed." No greeting, no explanation. It seemed the ministry had finally decided they could use him again. "Yes, sir." Harry watched the form collapse into fires-consuming flickers and turned towards the stairs. Time to put on the heavy Graphorn armor. It was one article of clothing he had no trouble picking out on his own. The heavy material gleamed with purple and brown hues that denoted its magical properties, an inherent strength that rivaled any dragonhide and an imperviousness to many magical spells. The standard armor, though of a higher quality than the average ministry outfit, consisted of multiple layers of the thick skin over lightweight cotton fabric, surprisingly flexible for all of its bulky weight. There were trousers, a vest and sleeves, and a hood with a portion that came up to cover the nose, mouth, and neck. He had added a mask of the same cotton fabric, a thin mesh material to cover even his trademark eyes, and his identity was safe from any observer. He had practiced many times in the armor, practiced in particular seeing through the mesh, consciously accepting that his sight was not optical, but mental, not limited to the ability of his eyes or his head or his body. He simply saw out, as his mind thought out, and not inward, and he knew it was only a matter of time before he learned to expand his sight farther away from himself, and then, perhaps, even see himself. But he did not yet have that kind of control, and it had taken more than half a year to learn to see beyond even a fragile mesh barrier. Harry picked up the simple oak staff, its dragon core a line of orange fire hidden inside the steady green, its length capped with purple metal. With one last look down at himself, Harry turned, heading down the stairs at a brisk pace to stand before the fireplace. After a quick message to Creature for Vaughn, if the guard arrived in the morning before he returned, Harry grasped the flu powder and prepared himself. Then he threw it into the fire and spoke his destination aloud. He stood in a room with other souls, some familiar, some not. His own team was arrayed around him, familiar tides in a chaotic sea. At the front, Robard's salmon light was bright with energy, his voice calm and clear as he gave the opening brief. "We have intelligence that the two main potion masters for the British sect of Luxembourg, whose wares were confiscated last month, are residing in a large warehouse inside Muggle London. The residence appears to house at least a dozen other witches and wizards, all veteran members of the group, whose activity drew us to the area. These are highly trained individuals, and will be ruthless in their defense of the building once alerted, and might have the ability to call in reinforcements via an illegal flu connection. Our warding team, under Captain Matthews, will slide a general anti-portkey and apparition ward into place as soon as the three designated hit wizard teams have entered. This will trap you as much as it will corner them." A pause, not a soul rustling in response. Harry remembered the assassin who killed Mr. Burke, both of the men part of the same group, a group that had not felt the least remorse for those killed and injured in the explosion that tore through Nocturne Alley the night of Burke's assassination. There is a possibility that some type of illegal items or slaves are being kept on the premises, though this is not confirmed. If slaves are present, it is entirely possible they are under the influence of some of the same type of potions we have seized, and may attack alongside their captors. Try to capture, and not kill, these slaves. We believe it will be easy to recognize them, as Lux Samba generally targets children and adolescents for trafficking over adults. It was said so matter-of-factly. Harry saw the reaction building, a wave of emotion that made hearts beat faster, fists clench on wands. Captains, inform your members of their assignment. Teams Dragon, Winged Horse, and Owl will enter the warehouse. Teams under Andrews, Ferris, and Sawyer will maintain the perimeter. Captain Matthews has the warding team. Healer Zant has medical staff at the ready. Dismissed. Reconvene in 15 minutes. Harry saw souls pivot and whirl, collapsing into circles of color and lowered, commanding voices. Ethan's blue was the center of his own half-circle, her voice strong. Winged Horse is assigned with retrieval of both the potion's masters, alive if possible. All other members of Lux are expendable. We go through the second rear exit and take the stairs down to basement level. When we reach the lower floor, Abraxan leads center point, the Stral and Granian to either side, arrow formation, as we've practiced. I will take center and shield. Her magic pulsed in rapid beats, her life a furnace of azure power. Hippogriff will take the rear, covering our backs as needed, rotating forward if any of the formation falls. This will be close quarters. Griff is also with us to take down any wards that might be protecting the potion masters when we find them. Lux is known for its complex warding systems. Harry nodded when it was his name was mentioned, adrenaline racing through his veins. This was not like his previous experience. This was much more planned and methodical, his knowledge of hit, wizard tactics and asset. Time. Robard stalked to the front again, calling each captain by name, listening as they repeated their portion of the operation. Then portkeys were distributed, last reminders given. One by one, the teams vanished into white magic and nothingness, time to absolute perfection. And with his heart drumming in his ears, he heard Ethan speak the word, and felt the tug and whirl of the portkey's magic pull him away. Into the still quiet of a muggle street, beside a building of purple metal and black shadows. Owl took the top level, on brooms from above, entering through windows, a chink in the outer wards that had been carefully cultivated by Matthew's warding team. From there, Dragon entered and stormed the second level and its sole fireplace, dismantling any hope of escape through the flue network and crippling the core warding structure for the building. Harry learned later that 2 members of that team were injured, 1 critically, while 6 wizards of Lux were killed and 1 captured. With the wards loose and tattered, it was time for Winged Horse to enter the bottom level, and on the command they methodically swept the first floor, ignoring the sounds of spellfire above them, Abraxan taking down a soul of cracked beige, Granian another of pure moss green. Harry broke the lower wards guarding the staircase down, and they descended one by one in complete silence. He heard the voice first, tremulous, innocent, echoing up the stairway. "Go away, just go away." A choked sob, a small soul of deep violet, young and strong and imperfect, the spiderweb of cracks marring the surface of what should have been beautiful innocence. Violet light lunged at Abraxan, who took it down with swift practicality, the binding spell freezing the child into place. The Stral cursed, and Harry saw them, more souls, all small, all oddly fragile in the darkness of concrete and steel, faced with adult souls hardened to what must be done. One by one they fell, some on top of each other, all levitated carefully to the sides as they passed by, Harry looking into each soul they passed, unable to stop his anger from growing with each crack he saw. Some small creases, others jagged and already broken, as splintered as Luna Lovegood. When they entered the basement, 2 adults attacked with spellfire wicked red spells of evil intent that appeared from around the small children they used as their shields. Abraxan hesitated, but Ethan did not. Her shield countered those spells, even as Granian stunned first one child, then the next, the small terrified form slumping to the ground amidst spell light and curses. One curse took the Stral in the shoulder, another Lux attacking from the right. Harry felt the sight of it all press in on him as he guarded their rear, a heavy weight as Ethan encountered spells. Granian dueling with practiced ease at her side, Abraxan covering the Stral's collapsed form, her orange light thrashing in familiar pain as her voice rose in the agonized shrieks of the Cruciatus. Both opposing sides were cornered now, one unable to flee, the other unwilling. Harry's fingers tightened on the plain green staff in his hand, and he let his carefully bound power rise and expand, looking out across the room into the souls of humans capable of brutalizing the innocent for wealth and pleasure. Even as Ethan's magic struck one, Harry took another horribly alluring shade of red and stopped its light. One last scream echoing into the room as red became white and vanished into death. Then he took another sage green hue into his grasp and halted the pulse of its life, even as he splintered its brightness into shards of broken glass that faded to more pale white before his eyes, the witch gasping out a single choked, agonized scream before her life ended. Harry left his position and stepped past the Stral and Abraxan, focused on the last light, a towering mustard yellow of power, as it faced off with Granian and Ethanan and held its own with elegant movements. This wizard was an obvious leader of the Lux, his skill evident, his speed and elegance making his movements into a macabre dance of murderous intent. Harry heard a mocking masculine laugh from the man, heard his accented words a near whisper, intending to inflict as much damage as his spells. The little ones are so lovely, are they not? Perhaps you shall enjoy them as much as I have. Another laugh, and he saw more small souls behind the duel caged in lines of white warded metal, huddled down, some crying, some screaming in anguished rage. More children, more broken children. The rage, the anger at such injustice, threatened to swallow him whole. He made himself stop and watch, waiting as he was trained, as Granian and Ethanan fought, light flashing in strobe-like flashes, until Granian fell with a pained grunt, red threatening to consume his heart in squeezing waves of light. Then Resolution Blue stepped in front of her companion, one sentence spoken in a hateful voice. Look at him. Such a seemingly innocent thing to say, but Harry understood. With a lunge of emerald green, he held Yellow Life in his hands and squeezed, watching as the wizard faltered and stumbled to his knees, his breath harsh in the sudden silence. And Harry looked at him, looked into the robed form of a man who seemed normal and clean-shaven, aristocratic face drawn into pained lines, teeth bared in a grimace. Then he ended him, as his team watched in silence, as children cried into hands of splintered light. 6 children were found within the warehouse basement, locked in cages, the lucky ones that had not yet been dosed with a mortentia, their own minds turned against them. The children who had been stunned on the stairs were not that lucky, and he saw the evidence of it written across their souls in the unique braille of brutality, as the healers descended to carry them away. The potion's masters were captured alive, the cowards hiding within tangled, suffocating wards that he turned into soft rain to coat their skin with a delicate layer of blue crystal. All of the members of Winged Horse were fine, each healed by their own healer Xanth before the Auras arrived to take over the scene. When they left, a mere hour after they entered, Ethanan rested a hand upon his shoulder, her slender form a pillar of strength. Drinks on me, everyone. And with that command, Harry followed his captain and learned the pleasure of getting drunk among comrades after a battle that scarred the mind more than the body. Blue light pushed him into Bangladesh green, slurred words that he could not follow, laughingly said. He was warm, his throat burning and his mouth dry. Hands held him upright until green bled into a yellow that cradled him in cool magic. It's not good, Master Potter. Gentle words, gentle hands, to drink this way. And abruptly white silk was rising over him, black stars shining so bright his eyes closed in helpless reaction, his head pounding with the effort it took to comprehend the iridescent shadows. But the black light followed him into darkness, his world nothing but the changing pattern of hallowed impossibility he wouldn't escape. He awoke once, to yellow hands giving him water that shone with white magic. He drank dutifully, trusting the cool liquid to ease the pain. Then he looked up into that familiar hue and sighed. One more, creature. I've destroyed one more. He didn't deserve death. Those children. He didn't hear a response to his last murmured words before sleep pulled him down again. You saw what I saw, right? Granian's masculine voice, a husky edge in the near dark of the ministry's hit, wizard headquarters before official hours. They lay side by side on the floor in the captain's tiny office, the space little more than a broom cupboard. But she liked her broom cupboard a lot. I'm not nearly drunk enough anymore to be having this conversation. Ethanon replied, eyes slitted against even the slight glow of the Lumos spell, her head thundering like trolls having a rock concert. Grainy inside, sitting up, his robes rumpled from the op, the drinks afterwards, and the stumbling path that had taken him and his too drunk to apparate friend to her office for a sober-up. Those eyes. I might have been down on the ground at that point, but I still saw them. I saw what he did. Ethanon groaned, rolling over to put her back to the wall, one hand cradling her sore head. Not drunk enough, remember. But her friend, it seemed, was in a rare, talkative mood. It was like watching someone under the cruciatus, except he didn't scream. But his face, the sheer terror, it was somehow worse. The other two had screamed. Ethanon had heard them, glimpsed one thrash wildly from the corner of her eye. Granian continued, and she opened her eyes fully to see him staring blankly out the open doorway into the shadowed corridor beyond. I thought I saw the man die. The way he fell, the way his eyes went blank. Except he wasn't dead yet. He lived long enough for Xanth to take a look at him. What does that even mean? She made herself sit up, reaching out one hand to shove her partner, gritting her teeth through the pounding in her skull, the burning in her eyes. It means we've got fucking Merlin on our side, so shut up about it and piss off until I feel human again. Harsh words, but Granian had known her long enough to only shove her in return, sending her to the floor with a pained groan. I'm not the one who literally got pissed afterwards, so don't pretend the memory isn't burned in your mind either. She had no response to that one, damn him, but at least Granian seemed to have said his piece. With a sigh, he lay back down, hands twisted behind his head. Ethanon mimicked the posture and waited for the sober-up to finish its job. She needed to go home and leave work and all its memories behind for a little while. Lux Samba. With this last successful operation, we have fractured their hold in Britain. Scrimgeour's grin was fierce. Praise the day that goes by without another mention of candied love potions. Robard spoke softly in response to his minister's words. And no casualties. Our men are trained well, Robard said, eyes unwavering. They were prepared. You won't acknowledge his influence on events. They both knew to whom the minister referred. He was only a small portion. He removed wards that might have suffocated the two Lux potion masters before Matthews could unravel them. He killed 3 members of the group. Scrimgeour returned. Ethanon's report said he was pivotal. He killed them, yes, but one body lived for several minutes after he did so. Xanth said it resembled the empty husks left behind after a Dementor's kiss. He is an asset, Scrimgeour pressed. He is what he wants to be, with all due respect. Gerald leaned back into his chair, sighed. Why aren't you more worried? A silence, then his friend and minister spoke. Because every Dark Lord has been alone. They don't come from loving Muggle households, don't have Muggle-born friends. They don't have ties to humanity. They are not kind. I would be more worried if he was alone, drifting away from society, not championing ourselves in the Wisengamot. Gerald thought on that for a moment, testing the theory for holes. Not all Dark Lords lack friends or a noble purpose. It is their methods that distinguish them, not their goals. Then show me a method that has not been sanctioned as necessary. Frustrated breath. We have taught him to be even more dangerous. We have taught him how we operate. What if we are wrong? You cannot gain trust unless you give it as well. Rufus paused, resting one hand on the scar of an old injury that ached with the seasons. Life is full of uncertainty. Yes, Robard paused, eyes dark. And what happens when life takes one of those ties you say keeps him from falling into darkness? What happens when someone hurts him? I guess we will see. Final words to end an argument he could see no resolution to. But I do not plan on my ministry being that thing. I pity the ones who are. And on that last statement, both could firmly agree. This shouldn't have happened. Firm words in a musical language. Nothing has gone right in Britain for months, escalating from Dagel's capture. A pause as eyes watched the speaker, her form slender, her face sharp angles and cold emotion. One dared to speak. The current minister is competent. A swift gesture, and the words stopped, to be replaced with chilling softness. The current minister should be dead, and he is not. I want to know why, and I want to know what has changed. I do not want excuses. I do not want platitudes. I want to know how my wards failed to cover Dagel's escape. I want to know why my potion masters are not dead when they were captured, why my wards did not suffocate them as intended if a critical breach of the premises was underway. I want to know why my merchandise is not currently being sold, but under custody of the British Ministry. So soft, her voice so elegant and deadly. This time, no one spoke. When do you decide to let someone else give justice for a crime instead of yourself? Harry broke the silence that filled the living room, the silence that had fallen ever since his guard arrived late that afternoon to find him staring into the fireplace with grim contemplation. When you don't trust yourself to be impartial. Blue tones of green, a calm soul with a calm voice. Impartiality, being fair and just. Is justice not a punishment that fits the crime, one limb for another? Harry couldn't erase from his memory the souls he had seen the night before, couldn't yet forget the experience of his power holding a soul in its grasp and squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. Historically, yes, but motives matter as well in a more civilized world. Someone who kills to defend himself should not be killed in return. And the executioner, what about the person who punishes the true murderers with death? Is he guilty of murder as well? Squeezing until cracks splintered along old, deep scars, scars so deep they had to be from the actions done to the very young or by the very, very evil. Vaughn shifted in his seat, legs stretched out to their full extent. Some would argue no person should be killed for any single crime. That to do so negates their ability to ever find atonement. Others argue that if such people are not punished in a horrific, final way, that others would be more likely to commit such crimes. An executioner is merely a tool, a weapon used to obey whatever morality is held at the time. If morality is flexible, and laws are only made by men with fluid morals, then how do you trust in the justice given by anyone but yourself? How do you trust your own morals if they can change based on your environment, your culture, your age, and experience? The guard returned, proving he had not simply been muscle on the aura force. Harry closed useless eyes, watching flame as it consumed, and consumed, and consumed its only purpose in life, its only desire to burn. If you can't trust yourself, who can you trust? Splinters of yellow color, falling like the rain, shattered and broken, not fading away but ending, simply ending with nothing left of life or death or time. What happened, Harry? That calm, matter-of-fact voice, not judging, not condemning, and Harry thought he trusted this man enough to not completely filter the truth. I ended someone. I beat of silence, a flicker of Bangladesh green. You've killed before. I was told you killed 3 last night alone. Ethan had her own kills, as did others from the teams. It is not unusual, with the way wizards duel, especially against targets bearing armor and using dark magic. Perhaps talking to an aura who had fought in the Battle of Azkaban prison about the morality of killing evil was a poor choice. It was said that the auras there had executed many of the defenseless prisoners during that one bloody night, alongside their armed colleagues. But I had a choice. I could have simply incapacitated all 3. They might have had valuable information. Instead, I allowed my own emotions to get the better of me. I judged them and punished them, and one of them will never get that chance at atonement. There would be no more time for that towering, cruel, yellow soul. Confused silence. He could feel the other man trying to work through what he said, trying to read between the lines and find the unspoken truth. Did your punishment fit the crime, then? How many souls, young innocent souls, had the monsters of Lux bruised and battered? How many had they cracked and broken into splintered pieces? How many had Lux sold to others who would finish their wicked work? How many of those souls had survived? How many had died? How many had simply ended, too broken and beaten by life to find their solace in the healing unwinding of death? Yes, Harry answered, positive on that one fact. They deserved every portion of it, and perhaps more. I might have only broken them and let them live with the scars, if they were not scarred and broken already. Breaks that could only occur through doing great harm on another living being, not the spiderweb cracks of a victim, but the jagged breaks of a monster inside unleashed upon the world. His power flexed, an emerald storm with flashes of black light, and the stone upon his finger rumbled with the thunder of it. I can't help you with the morality of this. Vaughn's statement was simple and honest. It, along with his unwavering loyalty, was the kind of thing that wasn't bought, but earned. But I won't tell you that you did wrong, either. I don't really understand what it is you see in people, so how can I understand why you would react to that sight the way you did? Harry only looked into the fire, watching it burn, feeling its heat. You don't blame the fire for burning something precious. You blame the person who set it upon the precious thing. Am I the fire, or the hand holding it? Green light moved, coming closer, resting one warm hand on his shoulder. Sometimes you need fire to burn away the stench of rot and decay, to warm the cold air and light up the night. It does not have to burn everything in sight. It can be contained, manipulated, a tool humanity could not survive without. Harry's lips twisted into a humorless grin. So, you're saying I need a fireplace for myself? A squeeze in response, a muffled laugh. I think you already have one. And turning, Harry saw precious light blazing in the doorway in tones of blue and violet. One couldn't ask for a more beautiful place to be contained. Hermione sat beside him, seeing the strain on his face in the tense line of his jaw, his eyes. His hair was wild and growing long, in need of another cut, his clothing still rumpled from sleep. It was dark outside, and Harry appeared to have just rolled from bed. Vaughn left them with a small smile of acknowledgement, the wizard's brown eyes dark with thought. She waited until she heard him speaking with Fallen outside to reach out and touch Harry's hand, the one that held his cloak in a tight white fist. He relaxed minutely, turning his body towards her, his hand releasing to grasp her own. I was told about last night, or at least as much as the elves know. I'd rather hear your version. He let out a long breath, his head falling to the side to rest upon the couch, eyes staring blankly at her collarbone. Then he told her, with the kind of detail she imagined he might put into an official report if one could understand the significance of colors and patterns. She did not flinch at his mention of killing any more than she did at the notion of him ending a soul. He had done that once before already. She only held his hand and listened as he listed each child he had passed, their small hues, their quiet sobs, each one imprinted into his mind like a horrifying portrait. Then I let Ethan drag me to a pub and drink I don't know how many shots of fire whiskey, still decked out in full Grafforn armor, which is a difficult feat to pull off, by the way. At some point, Abraxan and Ethan might have sung a drunken rendition of the Hogwarts school song, with the Stral passing through so many different forms it made even me dizzy. Or perhaps that was the alcohol by then. Granian didn't drink, just watched us make fools of ourselves. It's all still a little hazy after that. They're probably pictures. Hermione leaned into him, smiling. If I've judged your team correctly from the stories you've told me of training. He grinned, and her heart lightened at the gesture. Probably. He reached out, questing with his fingers until he found her chin, moving his palm down her neck to hold her lightly, green eyes tired as his smile faded. I'm more worried that I feel no remorse than that I destroyed another soul. I'm worried about what I might become if I don't treat all souls, no matter how evil, as precious things. I'm worried that with the knowledge of reincarnation, I will no longer give life the same sanctity that I used to, knowing death is not the end. What will I be then? Who am I to manipulate lives and deaths in such a manner? And when do I know I've gone too far? Hermione drew closer, sharing his heat as he shared his heart. When you harm something innocent, Harry. When you destroy something unbroken simply for expediency or your own gain. When you no longer care enough to ask the questions you just did. You're still human. You get angry, and you do things you wouldn't do normally. You can't expect to be coldly rational all the time. It would be inhuman to face someone who hurt children and feel nothing but calm calculation. She kissed him gently, a caress of mouths meant to soothe, not incite. And you have me. I'm not afraid to knock you down a few pegs if you ever step out of line. A laugh, choppy with emotion as he pressed his forehead against her own. You know I would do anything for you, right? She began to pull away and grinned at his disappointment even as she tugged him to follow her. Perfect. Right now I want dinner. Creature told me you haven't eaten all day. He groaned, rocking to his feet with exaggerated emotion. You ask too much from me. I simply can't do it. Too late. She tucked her arm through his, smiled up into his face. You've already said you would do anything. Be glad I'm not asking for a night out. I've been told of this wonderful restaurant 3 blocks over. Have mercy on me. He grumbled, then yelped as she poked him in the side. But he was smiling when he walked into the kitchen, and both house elves gave each other firm nods of congratulations. Sometimes a house just needs a woman's touch to set it aright again. Hermione left Harry asleep in the bed. hair tousled, limbs stretched out across the space like he owned it, which technically he did. His unconsciousness just hadn't learned how to share yet. She smiled fondly at that thought, getting dressed before absently picking up the shining silver cloak from the end of the bed and flinging it over his still form, watching the fabric settle around him like a second skin, rippling and reflecting the light for a moment, the cloak's version of a lazy stretch. Odd how she had begun to take its presence for granted. Odder still that she often forgot just what it was. She never forgot the potential of the stone, nor how Flamel had looked, a middle-aged man regal in his pose, anger in eyes that had fixed upon her with furious disappointment. That disappointment had never quite faded away before he did. With one last look at Harry's peaceful face, she turned away, closing the door as quietly as possible before descending the steps, meeting the two faces that had first appeared to her hours before, concerned with Harry's silent facade. He's fine. It was just a difficult assignment. Kraken was willing to take those words at face value. Creature was a more canny being. What can Creature do to help the Master? Hermione lifted one hand, ran it through her hair, and found the mass disheveled. A quick spell removed that evidence of how she spent the last hours. No need to rub her independence in her father's face. Well, you can always reorganize the furniture. It would be a simple, easy reminder that her lover was, indeed, human. A few stubbed toes and curses might go a long way towards easing his concern over his growing abilities. For a second, she saw consternation on Creature's face. Then the wrinkled elf grinned, displaying teeth too reminiscent of a goblin's for her own comfort. Creature has considered a thorough cleaning, perhaps replacing some old furnishings. The house must be kept to a certain standard. Of course. Hermione waved up the stairs. Let me know how it goes, huh? And at the house elf's pleased nod, apparated straight from the building into her room. It was just as it was when she left after a quick word to her mum. Unopened mail spilled across her bed, the current project she had been putting off and had finally decided to undertake when the welcome intrusion of the house elves occurred. Her own personal fan mail, or rather, Viola James' fan mail. It wasn't all pleasant, of course. Not a few were ugly things filled with curses, some literal curses worked into parchment or ink. Others were requests for interviews or offers of funding for targeted research. Some, the more tempting offers, were from various boards or magazines who wanted her opinion on a particular topic. Some of those she had replied to over the years, keeping her and Harry's pen name a presence in the wizarding world, one that had not faded into obscurity. But after the successful campaign for house elves, the bulk of the mail were what amounted to love letters, fawning things of gratitude, platitudes, and obvious and not so obvious invitations. Few contained anything useful. But she still read each and every one, because amongst the fodder there would inevitably be a few gems to make her smile. Awkwardly written letters from children, inspired into deeper interest in transfiguration. Sweet letters from elderly witches and wizards, grateful for their servants' freedom, containing stories of decades of loyal service. Those few made it worth it. However, after 30 minutes of resuming her monotonous task, she glanced a name that made her calm shatter. Weasley. Her eyes jerked back to the letter half hidden under another, pulling it free to look closer at the thick envelope. Her pen name was written in an elegant hand. The forwarding addressed the standard dummy they had set up years before. But in the corner, block letters had carefully written out a name she still was uncomfortable reading. Ronald Weasley. Ron Weasley had written Viola James. In the magical world, it seemed pigs really could fly. Chapter 24. A Green Mother's Love. It's just what the minister said would happen, Harry murmured, as Hermione finished reading the letter from Ronald Weasley. Not even a year, and two species have contacted us. Hermione tapped the parchment against her palm, the words nearly memorized with the many times she had read it after her first startled viewing the night before. But this isn't like the vampires situation. Werewolves are still human, were once completely normal, and nearly to one turned against their will. There are so many avenues that could be taken to help them, and not that far to go. The only restrictions on them currently are the laws about where and how they can be employed. Harry absently turned the ring on his finger, gaze staring blankly ahead. She could see the thoughts rippling across his face, his lips turned down in a frown, his jaw tense. The very fact that most are unwillingly turned is the very reason it will not be easy. Werewolves are still around because they keep hurting other people. The disease drives its host into insanity once a month, and during that time they are forced to spread that disease in a violent, often fatal manner. I'm not even sure it can be called a disease, as it changes the very pattern of its host irrevocably. It's a mutation. Hermione lifted her chin. I will do more research, but I think the ministry is approaching the issue wrong. The laws are not even a proper quarantine during infectious times. They make no sense. If we can open this issue with a potential solution to stopping the spread of lycanthropy, we might make more headway. He smiled at her, a slight shake of his head. You're taking this one on, aren't you, even with college about to start? Hermione lifted a hand, grinned. Just try and stop me. It took some more discussion before they had the beginnings of a plan. Viola James would respond to Weasley with her support, and a vow to research the regulations concerning lycanthropy and what might be done to overthrow them safely. Hermione would find a volunteer to interview, and who might volunteer to let Harry observe his pattern in more depth in the hopes of discovering anything not already documented in the various wizarding texts on lycanthropy. She didn't want to rush things, and starting mundane college would definitely take a great deal of her time. Hermione looked at the list on her desk, a simple bullet-pointed thing, the page divided into 4 even quarters by thick inked lines. Medicine. 1 year of basic college curriculum and pre-med courses, 5 years of medical school, 4 to 6 years training. Pharmacology. 4 years of M-Pharm, 1 year of registration training. Potions. 2 years apprenticeship, 2 to 4 years of journeyman training. Healing. 4 years apprenticeship, 4 to 6 years of journeyman training. Hermione had known from the beginning she would have to choose. In order to realize her dream of melding the wizarding and mundane medical fields, she would need to know enough of all 4 to be competent, but she would not have enough time to be able to master them. They would have to assemble an entire team of individuals willing to work on the problem from both sides of the equation. It would take the longest to become a doctor, and the regime was arduous. Healing was a close second, most healers working for 8 or more years to finally earn their title. Conversely, attaining a potions apprenticeship with a few masters willing to take on pupils was known to be a cutthroat race every summer. A student had to have either the best NEWTS, glowing recommendations from professors, or a lot of money, preferably all 3. Pharmacology seemed the easiest field to enter and the shortest certification to gain. But the amount of work and time one had to dedicate was just as arduous as any of the others. It had taken her all summer to decide not only on her chosen fields, but also on where to go to get them. Potions and pharmacology it was. The two were made to complement each other, the vast knowledge of ingredients and their reactions unavoidably attractive when considering her hopes for the future. And while settling on a college in London and getting accepted had been easy, finding a potions master had not been. She had been sending out owls for weeks and received nothing in return but polite, and not so polite, denials. She did not have enough experience. She had not attended a wizarding school. She had no wizarding references other than her tutors, none of which were potion masters. She wasn't from an affluent wizarding family, had no ties to anyone they knew could further their careers. The only thing they could not dismiss was her perfect OWLS and NEWTS, both of which had been taken at the ministry during their quarterly tests. She supposed her relationship to Harry also wasn't known among the secluded circle of potions masters, many of which cared little for politics and modern events. That might have changed things, but she didn't want to earn her apprenticeship because of who she was sleeping with anyway. And now college was to start in only a few weeks, and she had few promising names left on her list. If she found no one before New Year's, she would have to write it off as a loss and begin looking into healing apprenticeships. But until then, she had a new problem to focus on, a new cause to fight for. With a smile, she tucked her list into a drawer and opened up the large book that rested on her desk. It was time for Viola to begin writing another paper, and to do so she needed all possible facts. I'm beginning to realize just how difficult it is for Muggle-born witches and wizards to find a workable career path. Hermione grumbled from across the table that night, while Harry sat back and listened to the spell read over Viola's first draft in low tones. She insisted he review every part of her three-part writing process. He figured if she was doing the bulk of the writing herself, he could at least work as a sounding board. Harry glanced over, watching as blue-violet light tapped angry fingers on the green kitchen table. Lounging across from them, Vaughn accepted a cup of tea from Kraken, murmuring something that made the elf's yellow light flicker with happiness. Vaughn had been the only person they had told of their alternative identity. Harry had thought it necessary that one guard at least know of their other semi-celebrity persona, and he had come to trust the Exora far more than he ever expected. I mean, the entire apprenticeship system is skewed towards half-bloods and purebloods. It's antiquated at best, classism at worst. Hermione continued, and Harry flicked one tendril of power to discontinue the reading spell, focusing his entire attention on her disgruntled form. And many of the higher-paid careers still require a master of that craft's approval to get certified by the ministry. Harry considered that information, frowned. Many fields of magic are highly specialized, with Hogwarts acting as general education until students know what path they want to pursue. It makes sense to learn something so complex from another person, one with experience. It might simply be a matter of time for Muggle-born masters to start taking on students. Hermione snorted, and he didn't doubt she accompanied the sound with an eye roll. He hated it when she did that when he happened to be looking at her. Green cylindrical orbs rolling about in a skull was very disconcerting. You can't get Muggle-born masters without pureblood masters taking them on as apprentices first. It would take years, if the rate is a slow trickle of one or two apprentices at a time. What do all of the Muggle-born students do in the meantime? Ministry jobs start out menial, you barely make enough to afford to live, and most promotions favor established family connections. There are a few zoology training facilities, but those are among the most dangerous jobs in the wizarding world, and only take in a select few. So how do they find work without training? Harry had no answer to that. He only shook his head, wondering belatedly if this was going to lead to yet another adventure into political maneuverings. Bangladesh Green moved, boots of brown leather swinging up to prop themselves up solidly on the seat across from him. Vaughn could only get away with such an uncouth move when Creature and his foibles was not present. Well, Vaughn began, hands made up of streaming light running absently over his smooth head. They write letters to the minister pleading injustice, put articles in the Daily Prophet that everyone ignores, and most recently, they started a job agency. It's doing about as well as the articles, though, from what I've heard lately. It's the training, like you said. No one hires people who are not ministry certified or have been in business for at least 50 years and 2 generations. Hermione sat bolt upright, her light pulsing with emotion. A job agency for Muggle-born. Vaughn lifted his shoulders in a casual shrug. If you can even call it that. No one's got a job yet that I know of. It's run by a decent enough bloke. Muggle-born, maybe in his late 50s. You don't see many Muggle-born stick around until that age without having found a solid niche somewhere. Most leave after trying for a year or two. My parents did, Muggle-borns the both of them. Got good jobs on the outside. Still get to enjoy magical stuff in their home if they want, long as they follow the statute guidelines. Hermione was practically leaning over the table by now, listening. When Vaughn stopped, she tossed a wild tangle of blue-violet hair over one shoulder, nodding her head firmly. That might be it. I've got it. So saying, she stood, marching around the table to seize him by one arm and proceeded to drag him from the room. Harry cast a look behind them to see Vaughn's mouth lifted in a crooked smile. I've been thinking, Harry, brainstorming. Hermione marched a pace away and pivoted, marching back, hands gesturing as she spoke. Years from now, where are we going to get people to work with us on our projects? Going to need teams of trained people, both mundane and wizarding kind. And those people need to be willing to work together. If we are ever going to be able to mass produce anything those teams invent, we will need even more people. Muggle-borns are struggling. There's not enough training or careers for them in the wizarding world. We could fix that, or at least help this other guy start fixing that. Meanwhile, we sow our own seeds with what we will need in the future in mind. Recruitment, the like. Her voice was eager, rambling. Harry held up one hand. We don't even know anything about this agency. Hermione gestured again, stepping forward until he could feel the warmth flowing from her skin. Then we find out. And if they are not what we need, then maybe we find one that is, or start one ourselves. It will take longer, but— Harry smiled, finishing her sentence when she paused. But we're going to need more than just us if we want to change anything. Hermione's lips pressed gently to his, and he could feel her own smile in the kiss. Exactly. Harry looked into her brilliant light with his eyes closed, leaning so close to her that she was all that he could see, one pulsing, living hue of color. He caressed her cheek with his own, then nodded once. I'll go with Vaughn. Check this place out. When she began to protest, he shook his head. You're busy enough with the werewolf research, and your college class is about to begin. I can do reconnaissance, all right. She laughed. Reconnaissance? Are you a secret agent now? Harry grinned. I don't think I look suave enough for that part, nor secret enough. Everyone knows what I look like after all. Too bad. Hermione gave him a swift hug, and he heard her continued smile in her voice when she spoke. I'll get back to work then. You tell me what you learn as soon as you find out. With that, she stepped back, and after one last teasing touch of her hand against his chest, apparated away. Harry waited until the last swirl of magic was gone from his home to turn and slip back into the kitchen. Vaughn sat in the same position he had been when Harry left. We're going to Diagon Alley tomorrow. Don't even ask where. Harry muttered, and the other wizard began to laugh. The need to visit the Muggle-born job agency was only the most recent excuse Harry needed to go to Diagon. He also needed desperately to escape his home. Creature and Kraken had, for some mysterious reason, decided the house needed to be taken apart and cleaned thoroughly. Furniture moved haphazardly and scattered about. He had felt like he was in the middle of a war zone he could not navigate or understand. Harry also knew Hermione had a plan to find a volunteer for the werewolf research. He had no doubt she would pursue books and articles for mention of names, then meticulously research them until she settled on the perfect candidate. But Harry did not want to wait that long. If Hermione was going to get involved with werewolves, Harry wanted to know what they were in for before she took that irrevocable step. Which was why he was taking his time on his way to where the job agency was, ambling through Diagon Alley and stopping in various shops, pretending to pursue wares and make purchases, all the while keeping an eye out for the telltale imprint of a werewolf on someone's soul. He had seen only one other so far, a hunched pale blue thing that had scuttled around a corner faster than he could take a step, but not so fast that he hadn't also seen the breaks that split the soul into painful fragments. He knew not all werewolves were broken. Ronald Weasley had not been, after all, but the brown man had also not lost his family or friends when infected. Instead, he had been hailed a hero. He doubted the pressures of a fearful and hateful society would leave many werewolves unscarred in such a way. It was with that thought, as he moved on once again, that he glanced down a small break-in between shops and saw it. He never would have seen the color if he had not been looking in places a werewolf might go to work and still be in compliance with ministry law. A hue of bright, cheerful cardinal red, wielding a wand of a deeper scarlet phoenix flame, singing a tune softly in a young feminine voice. And woven into the humanity of that red was the lupin hint of fur, much deeper than even Weasley's mutation, so ingrained it did not look like a mutation at all, but just a unique part of her pattern. Harry gestured towards Vaughn, waiting until the guard stepped closer to point down the lane. What do you see? The wizard was silent a moment before he spoke, and in that silence the girl kept singing her wordless tune. Female in her early teens. Dressed in casual robes, not poor or high quality. Light brown skin, dark hair, and light-colored eyes. Signs of lycanthropy. What signs? Harry asked softly. The full moon is tonight, which exaggerates the lupin features of the infected. Her skin color does not typically coincide with light eyes, and they appear to have the telltale amber tint, though we are too far away to be certain. She is cleaning with an agility and grace few teenagers her age display. She uses a wand, which, while not illegal, would suggest she must have received private tutelage. Her fingers look strange, too long around her wand. Harry nodded. Stay here. Blue-green light jerked in what he hoped was a nod as Harry began to walk down the alley. The girl's singing cut off sharply, red pivoting to face him, posture alert as her heart began to beat rapid counterpoint. He had never seen someone become alert so quickly before. Had she heard or smelled him first? Hello. Harry began. "I was wondering if you would be willing to answer a few questions for me. I'm willing to compensate you for your time." A hesitation, her life a rolling storm of adrenaline. "Show me the money first." A response that spoke of experience. "And I might help you." Harry smiled, reaching into his pocket, his movements slow as he saw her stiffen. When he pulled out a bag of sickles, she heaved out a breath, holding one red palm up to receive it. "Ask away, my lord." Kelly Valopoulos had been a werewolf since she was 3 years old, in a revenge turning that also took the life of her mother. Her father, stricken with grief, had killed himself the very next day, leaving his only child to the mercy of the British Ministry of Magic. But the ministry of those times had not had any mercy to give. It was instead a single shopkeeper in Diagon Alley who had fostered the child, a witch who had once been classmates with her mother. That same witch had bought her a wand and taught her magic, and in return, Kelly worked to clean and stock the small shop. "She's good to me. Built me a cage, for those nights. More than many was get. Plus room and board for just a few hours work each day. She's not married, got no kids to take care of but me. That's my life. I work, and I learn how to do things I would be able to use if I wasn't who I am. I exist." Even as she said that practical summary, Kelly Valopoulos' light shone, an unbroken flame. "I have hope, I'm going to inherit the shop. I can switch to our orders only, things that don't require personal contact, or maybe hire somebody for the storefront. I've been thinking, some people call me crazy, but I'm not going to give up and go feral." Harry focused on that word, eyes narrow. Feral, a shrug. People who get bit just can't handle it. Either their mind goes from self-pity, or they get mean, or just stupid. They don't take precautions, kill or infect somebody and get hunted down. Those that don't kill or get caught skulk around Nocturne or the forests, acting more like animals than people. Me, I know what I am. No, I gotta control me. Harry observed the girl's pattern again, taking in the minute shifts of her base humanity. "Do you dislike being locked up during the full moon?" The girl shivered, her pulse jumping before it settled again. "Who doesn't? It's horrible. There's this thing, it's like inside of us all, driving us. When you can't be driven, it crawls under your skin like bugs, stinging and pinching until you gnaw it yourself trying to dig it out. But you can never quite dig deep enough, past muscle and bone. I've heard wolfsbane takes away the itch, but I've never been able to try it. I think that's one thing that drives was feral. Itch you can't scratch unless you want to end up on the next wanted list for the auras." A pause, another shiver, before Cardinal Red flexed and straightened. "But it ain't so bad other times. I'm a lot stronger than other kids my age. I can hear things. You wouldn't believe the things I hear sometimes in the alley, private stuff. And my eyesight's better than good, especially around now. I can handle the itch one night a month." Harry considered that, questioned it. Is this itch simply to run or to kill? She snorted, a self-deprecating laugh spilling from her. "What isn't it? It's a desire to do something, like reaching for something glorious, something you know will be the most wonderful thing you've ever done, and then failing. I can't remember all of those times. It's a hazy cloud of sensation, but it always starts with this longing, like, like a craving for sweets, but 100 times stronger. Then there is a sense of loss that turns to horrible, horrible anger, anger at everything. I think anyone who feels that kind of anger would slaughter anything in its path. So you've never been free to find out just what the itch is for." Another laugh. "I can guess. I'm aware, aren't I? Everyone knows we bite and we kill if we're free. It's why the ministry keeps people safe from us." Harry wasn't sure how many werewolves would hold that opinion. "You don't hate the ministry." Red light rippled in a restless movement. "I'd like to be normal, but I'm not. I accept that. If I got careless only one time, I could kill someone, or worse, make someone like me. The ministry is just trying to protect people. Sure, I'd like more freedom during normal days. But where do you draw the line? I've heard the week before or after the moon, a werewolf can still do partial infections if they draw blood or bite. It's best if people just stay away from us." She spoke words by rote that she had obviously been told many times. Harry didn't doubt it was the witch who had taken her in who had said them first. "I think that's all my questions." Harry said softly, "Thank you for your time." "That's it." She sounded doubtful. "Nothing else." Harry made himself smile. "For now." He managed to find 2 more werewolves that morning in Diagon Alley as he wound his way slowly from one end to the other, both older men who walked huddled together, their movements eerily alike. were nowhere near as complacent as Kelly had been, their lights scarred and dim. And they hated the ministry with a passion bordering on insane rage. No jobs, no money, no potions, no place to go. We're dirt, that's what we are. Bugs, pests crawling in the muck, waiting to be exterminated by the ministry's auras the minute we try to help ourselves. A low growling sound, bestial, rumbled from one man's throat, the lupin pattern in his body as deep as Kelly's had been. They hate us, but they made us. They might not have sank fangs directly into our flesh, but they made the wolves hunt human streets, made them have no other recourse but pain and death. We kill ourselves, or we die killing others. We have no hope, we have nothing, we are nothing. The other man, silent until now beside his raging partner, finally spoke, laying one calming hand on the first's arm. We are moonstruck. We are pack. You and I, we won't seek death yet. Calm words, but also final ones. Yet. Death to these two was an inevitability. It was simply a matter of time. Moonstruck? Harry asked hesitantly, unsure if he should continue with his questions. The second man, a deep grey soul, nodded solemnly. The drive within us to hunt and feed, to sate the moon's unending hunger. She strikes us with her whips, and we run for her, our own harsh mistress. Harry felt a fission of excitement, the beginnings of a theory. You have run free, then? The first man cursed under his breath, murky brown light. But the second man answered again, matter-of-factly. I haven't killed a human, which is why I am walking through Diagon Alley alive. But I have run, yes. What was it like? Silence for a long moment, before Brown and Grey both reached out, linking hands as grey light spoke in reverent remembrance. Rapture. It was wondrous rapture, so alive, so connected with energy and magic. A high the likes of which no wizarding drug can mimic. If you run with brothers, then that high is magnified even more. If you end your run with a kill, anything, even the smallest mouse, then there is an explosion of sensation until your mind leaves you entirely, your being nothing but life and magic, sense and colors. One mouse, and I was satisfied for an entire month, no pain, no headaches, no itch for more. I felt like I had transcended. Brown light, soft now without the underlying rage. I was there, I felt it too. It was like the part of me that was pain or sorrow had died, leaving nothing but pure elation behind. But then, the next month, I was locked up, and everything was the way it had been before. A low so deep, a hole you feel you can never crawl out of. I became nothing again, nothing but a problem for society, a walking threat. Harry watched as the two men sagged, heads lowering, and spoke carefully into the depression that leaked from the men like a miasma of horrible pain. What about Wolfsbane? Brown snarled. No pain, but nothing to replace it. Just sorrow, endless fucking sorrow. You would think the ministry developed it to drive us all feral, drive us right into the streets where they could put us down like the dogs we are. I don't know why I haven't done so already. Maybe take a few of them down with me. Don't talk like that. Swift words. We are brothers. Harry looked between the two, quietly wondered to himself what could possibly be done to help. Then realized his best option might be to just ask. What would make you happy? He shook his head. I mean, what is it that makes being a werewolf so horrible? Grey light sighed. We are creatures with no purpose, no home, no lives. Nobody wants us, but nobody gives us a place to go. We have no country of origin, no region of safety. There is nowhere a werewolf can go to get a job, have a family, be a person. We are made animals because we cannot live like humans. The lucky ones manage to hide what they are, or have friends and family who support them. The rest of us drift, taking the scraps the wizarding world flings down for us, living day by day, moment by moment. Finally, something he might be able to use. And if there was someplace safe to go, tell me where it is, wizard, and I will go there. Harry was still frowning when he finally reached the tall, thin building that housed job training and placement. The place was a good 2 stories taller than its neighbors, but looked to be only half the width. It was also layered in multiple different wards, some of which were remote monitoring charms if he wasn't mistaken. JTP was not taking any chances with their security, which might mean they had run into problems before. He wasn't sure what kind of problems a place like this might have, though, and said as much to Vaughn. The man shrugged. You got to know the bloke who runs it. Ran afoul of some young purebloods vandalizing the place a few months back, handled it himself instead of calling in the auras. It got ugly with the parents, who did call in the auras. Man's had some sort of training in the muggle world, and is no slouch with a wand, either. Eventually, the matter was settled with a fine to Mr. Clifton for excessive use of magic on minors. But since then, this place has a nice target painted in invisible ink or something right on its pretty glass doors. Purebloods tend to get their noses bent out of shape when you mess with their airs, even when it's warranted. A fine wasn't enough punishment in their minds. Harry squinted at the building, trying to establish the physical details underneath the multi-layered magic. How does it look from the outside? Vaughn stood beside him, silent for a moment before he continued. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the alley. It's all shiny, metal and glass. That's probably why the kids wanted to vandalize it so badly. It's like a sore thumb next to everyone else's brick, wood, and stone. It's spotless and fancy, and just too different. Harry nodded, watching for a moment as the colorful sea of passing witches and wizards continued to flow past, few glancing towards the tall building. I've got our idea. Harry paused a moment, considering. This is supposed to be a general employment agency, right? Matching the unemployed with employers, facilitating training and such. One Bangladesh green hand waved in the air in a universal sign of ignorance. I guess so. Harry leaned against his staff, idly rubbing one finger against the stone on his middle finger as he thought. I'm not satisfied with all the wizards currently on rotation guarding my family and the Grangers' houses. I'd like to replace at least 3 of the 5 of them. Nothing but a simple head jerk of color from the other wizard, so Harry continued. So that's why I'm here. I'll see how they operate and judge from there. Sounds good enough. It's none of my business if you have an ulterior motive then. Harry heard the grin in Vaughn's voice, as well as the subtle inflection of a question. Harry smiled. If I have one, it will be of no importance for a very long time. Are you a schemer, Lord Potter? Harry only raised one brow as he straightened and began to walk forward. You tell me. The process felt more like something he would encounter in the mundane world. There was a secretary who gave him forms to fill out, sounding far too excited to help when he politely mentioned his inability to read or write. She didn't recognize him, which meant she either didn't read the Daily Prophet, didn't listen to gossip, or she hadn't lived in the country the last few years. She read aloud every single question on the 2-page application that was apparently provided to each prospective employer. Questions were routine, such as the type of work being given, any qualifications needed, and potential working hours and pay levels being offered. At each of his answers, her light would jerk with rapid nods as her hands flowed with constant motion, a mundane pen quickly jotting down his words. There was no other soul inside the main foyer. No one waiting in the green wooden chairs with their lighter green cotton cushions. No workers passed through on some business. No hopefuls darted in to place applications. The place was as silent as a grave, except for the witch's questions and Harry's answers. It was made obvious by the secretary that having a prospective employer was a miraculous event. She did everything but roll out the red carpet, assuring him multiple times that they should have a list of applications meeting his requirements owled to him shortly. Then, as Harry was beginning to think they would simply walk out, and that would be that, heavy footsteps sounded from around one corner, and light blossomed with the blazing energy of a powerful magic user in the steady beating prime of their life, which, in Harry's experience categorizing wizards, could be anywhere from their 20s to their 60s. Philip Clifton, the soul announced in a masculine voice as he approached, and began to hold out one hand that gleamed with a Merlot mix of red and brown color. I saw we had a minute pause as Harry turned to face the wizard, and he took in Harry's face. A visitor filling out forms. I hope we can help provide you with the people you are looking for. Thank you, Harry said, and accepted the handshake, another mundane gesture that hinted that this man had not left the Muggle world very far behind. I'll be waiting for your owl. Good, good. If we cannot find a good fit right away, we have multiple training courses being undertaken right now in charms work, warding, and advanced transfiguration for construction. The witch shifted, her voice a low murmur. He's looking for security guards to monitor Muggle houses. Mr. Clifton did not miss a beat. We have several contacts that might be amenable to work of that kind as well. I'll make sure their details are owled promptly. Thank you. Harry repeated, letting the quick flow of words wash over him. The man spoke with rapid words and sharp hand gestures, a forceful personality that made obvious that the man had no problems getting his point across clearly and often. The man was confident in his business, even if, as Vaughn told it, that business was sinking fast. "We look forward to working with you, Lord Potter." No doubt in his voice, nor any hesitation at using his name. Harry had to give him credit for confidence. "Thank." And with the third repetition of the evening, for lack of anything else to say, Harry turned to the exit, Vaughn a silent green shadow behind him. Werewolves are driven to hunt mammals of any shape, size, or species, warm-blooded, magical or non-magical. Doing so causes an extended mental and perhaps magical high. When this drive is prevented, they will harm themselves or any they come into contact with, including other werewolves. If allowed freedom to roam, even if a kill is not completed, they will still have some sort of chemical reaction that causes extreme mental pleasure. The presence of other wolves heightens these reactions. Wolfsbane muffles both the drive to hunt and the chemical reaction that rewards the hunting behavior. As a group, the infected fall into three main categories: the feral, who have given up any semblance of humanity; the moonstruck, who retain their desire to be human while still practicing the hunting drive of lycanthropy. Last is the, for lack of a better term, complacents, the ones who do not want to hunt or kill and are most willing to work and live within the law. Complacents are more likely to be friendly toward the ministry and see themselves as monsters. Moonstruck are more likely to hate and resent the ministry and its regulations. Ferals seem to hate everybody, including themselves. But even in these categories, there are crossovers. Greyback was a well-known moonstruck who was also quite feral. Hermione listened to her boyfriend, trying not to feel annoyed. Sometimes he just drove her crazy. Worse, the information he had gained without telling her was actually extremely useful, so she couldn't even be angry, which, of course, made her very annoyed, and reluctantly pleased because he had spent an entire morning in Diagon Alley searching out werewolves to question for her. Sometimes her emotions made no sense whatsoever, which, she reminded herself, was why one learned to think rationally and not emotionally. I can't find any mention of organization within the ranks of werewolves, other than the occasional packs that sprout up lead by one disgruntled werewolf or another. They do seem to congregate in pairs of 2 or 3, perhaps because of that reaction you talked about, or simply to be with people who understand them. Hermione said calmly, her pen making quick notes across the page of her notebook. They are like the lepers of the Dark Ages, a group of people ostracized for the contagion they bear. Harry tilted his head, black hair falling across his face, and waved away in an absent motion, forehead wrinkled in thought. Lepers had colonies, didn't they, in some places? She nodded. There still are a few in other countries. They were once very popular, before more was known about the disease. The social stigma was very great for those infected, mostly because it was believed to be highly contagious. Most colonies were supported by donations from governments or religions and located in remote areas to keep the quarantine easy to manage. Life inside varied from horrid poverty to normal, healthy societies, depending on the time period, the country, and the management. Harry began to pace, taking carefully measured steps across her bedroom and back. Why hasn't the wizarding world tried quarantine? It seems a sensible measure. Hermione shook her head, feeling a bit bitter as she considered the history book she was currently working her way through. In Britain, extermination was the quarantine method. It even had some measure of success, managing to kill off entire families and decreasing attacks for years at a time. But werewolves immigrated or brought back infections with them from travels off the island. Nothing completely prevented random outbreaks. Once extermination was outlawed, the current regulations were put into place, a sort of semi-quarantine, not allowing werewolves to interact with uninfected people. But it fixes nothing. Werewolves still walk around, they just can't work. He stopped, green eyes unfocused, power a thick presence about him. They have nowhere to go. Hermione tapped her pen against her desk, brow furrowed in thought. The way I see it, there are several points of attack. This situation parallels leprosy in many different ways. First, we need to establish some sort of colony for those infected. A town, even. Some place with homes, a school, markets. Establish trade and jobs within that colony. Do not present it as a quarantine as much as an optional refuge, a place they can go to escape bigotry. Perhaps even a place warded to contain them during the full moon, a wide enough area where they can follow the hunting drive in peace. Another hard tap, the paper thudding dully underneath the attack. Second, research the hell out of lycanthropy and get the true facts out there. Most people seem to think a werewolf breathing on them will transfer the disease, or that all werewolves are hulking men out to eat their children. A lot of information is out there, and a lot of it seems contrary to colloquial knowledge. I bet, with a little incentive, a group of witches and wizards would be willing to work on that. She smiled, the plan coming together neatly in her mind. And last, we get the ministry to change their useless laws. If what I suspect is true, there is no way a werewolf could transfer the disease by teaching or cashiering or any office drone job. They would have to physically attack someone, which most normal, sane individuals who want to make a living do not do. And for every crazy feral werewolf out there, there are a dozen crazy whack-job wizards going about killing people. She turned to see Harry grinning at her, eyes locked on her nose. "You are brilliant," he said, and any annoyance she might have still felt melted away like snow in the rain. "I think I'm Hermione-struck." Laughter bubbled out of her as she rose, rolling her eyes in a gesture she knew was lost on him. That was incredibly corny. But she walked into his arms and settled there in a place as familiar and comfortable as home. "I'm almost sorry for you." He laughed into the skin at her nape, pressing a kiss there. "You're my refuge, then." She leaned back and poked his side, her smile wide with humor. In the context of this conversation, that could also be construed as calling me a leper colony. Try again. "Oh, Viola, infect me with your contagious love, please." He held his serious face a mere moment, then they both dissolved into helpless laughter. That was horrid, absolutely horrid. She laughed the words into his skin, her arms tight around him. "Stop, please." He growled with faux ferocity, fingers tight as they pulled her ever closer. "I'll hunt you until I die." She felt the ripple of power, her body shivering as energy passed through her, energy she knew as well as her own. She lifted her head, met eyes that glowed with emerald light. Hermione grinned, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then chase me." And as his eyes narrowed, she jerked free and sprinted for the door. With a wild, incredulous laugh, he ran after her, and she felt his power like a hand at her back. Jane Granger watched first Hermione, then Harry, race for the front door, acting for all the world like preteens playing a game of tag. "Don't slam the—" She began, then only sighed as a loud bang echoed through the house, followed closely by a crash as, no doubt, one picture hanging fell to the floor. At times like these, she remembered the two were still only teenagers. With a forbearing shake of her head, she started for the hallway to set to rights whatever had, hopefully not broken. Harry caught her 2 blocks down, though only because she let him catch her. When she apparated them both to Grimmauld Place, he only groaned his approval against her mouth. Then there were no more words, only light and laughter, and the wild sensation of skin on skin, heat and power, intertwined for a moment into one single drive for completion. And later, Harry could only think of one word to really describe the experience, a word he had heard earlier that day about a very different sort of hunt. Rapture. "I visited the JTP as well." Harry murmured into the skin of her shoulder, one hand absently caressing the blue-violet light of her back where she lay on her stomach across his bed. It all seemed very normal, mundane. She hummed, her voice muffled as she spoke into the green cotton pillow under her face. "Good. I'd expect it to be if it supports Muggleborn." Harry breathed in her scent, today's mix of sweet vanilla soap and ink, dipped his head with a nod that also served to brush his lips against her warmth. "I asked for applications for Muggle-born guards, for your parents' and my aunt's houses. I know Aunt Petunia has been having some issues with some of the pureblood guards. Nothing horrible, but there is friction there, a lack of respect. I figure this is a solution that might solve more than one problem." She turned, and he could see the surge of emotion in the way her steady light beat faster. "Brilliant. Though I haven't noticed any problem at home, I barely even noticed them, to be honest." Harry grinned. Creature would tell you that servants and guards both are supposed to be invisible. It's part of their job, and in the magical world, that's quite literal. She shuddered, relaxed back into the sheets with a sigh. Invisible servants. Another mundane fairy tale come into reality in the wizarding world. Her voice was drowsy, her lights slowing again. Harry resumed his gentle caress, smiled as she dropped easily into sleep. She was exhausted, had probably been staying up too late and waking up too early, working on her research. His viola tended to do that when she had her teeth in a new project. He would let her rest now, for without a doubt, she would be up soon enough and eager to put his latest information onto paper. Harry smiled and rested his head on her shoulder, listening to the sound of her breathing, watching the rise and fall of her light, and committing every moment of it into memory, as the black-white cloak rose to lay gently over them both with a rustle of silk. This is home. The next day, Viola James wrote out a final draft of her paper on the issue of lycanthropy and owled one copy to Ronald Weasley for his opinion. A week later, she received what amounted to a plea to make her acquaintance. It made Hermione wonder just what the redhead would think if he found out her true identity. She said no, of course. She wasn't ready yet to reveal who she was to anyone else, and she certainly wouldn't pick a Weasley to be first if she were. But she was very, very polite when she declined. Lycanthropy, what is it really, and is the ministry responsible for its spread? By Viola James, Minerva McGonagall was purposefully ignoring the resignation of one Severus Snape when she picked up the current issue of the Daily Prophet. It had been 3 days since the dour man had placed the document on her desk, and in 3 days she still hadn't wanted to accept it. The man was a master at potions and defense. He was also horrible with young children, but he would be a nightmare to replace. The headline was nothing spectacular. Another day, another wizard caught breaking the statute. This man wasn't very original, enchanting pigs to fly over the countryside outside Norwich. It had apparently been a prank on relatives that escaped in a spectacularly public fashion. The second page held various updates on issues within the ministry. New bans on certain potions' ingredients, updated restrictions on cauldron thickness, an article on lycanthropy. Her eyes stopped short and snagged, caught by the name more than the title. Viola James. And just like that, she knew. She must be going blind in her old age, to not have seen it sooner. It was her only excuse, the clues all there right in front of her eyes, paraded by like sparkling enchanted elephants. She had followed the woman's work for years. Any person in the transfiguration community who developed new techniques was noteworthy, one who managed to prolong transfigurations by days even more so. In the years since that first big discovery, more had come, branching out to transmutation and magical theory. She had been fascinated by the ideas, reading them in print, imagining meeting the brilliant witch, perhaps as old as herself, a recluse who preferred her peace and quiet to the nagging of the various research boards. She had her own preconceived ideas about who the woman must be. Perhaps that is her excuse, because she had met Viola James already. Hadn't she allowed her into Hogwarts to scan the mirror of Erist? Hadn't she talked, years ago, with Harry Potter about the nature of souls within Transfiguration, then read a paper by Viola James about the very same topic less than a year later? How many times had she listened to Potter describing his unique vision, wondered at the potential, watched Hermione Granger taking careful notes on a muggle pad of paper with a muggle ink pen? Hadn't she displayed her animagus form multiple times, and heard Harry Potter theorize that the reason she retained her human mind was because her soul did not transform, only her human body? Minerva leaned back into her chair, suddenly overwhelmed. The brilliant, revolutionary witch that no one knew was not a witch at all, but a witch and a wizard working together. Two young people, not even graduates of a magical school. The blind sorcerer, whose name was still whispered about inside the halls of Hogwarts, whose stone dragon still lay crumbled in pieces where it had fell after the tournament. She saw it nearly every day from her window, saw students clamber over it, posing for pictures. Remembered the sight of it, wings and claws of rock and stone, an impossibly powerful display of transfiguration. How amazed she had been that the boy could even stay standing after such a feat. How, in Merlin's name, has she not realized it sooner? No wonder the two preferred anonymity, relying completely on their reputation as a scholar, not one's celebrity status. Minerva shook her head, prepared to read the newest article, one in a series she saw as becoming increasingly political, and she didn't have the least intention in revealing the newest knowledge she had gained. She rather liked keeping a secret. It made her think fondly of the many ones her predecessor had carried. Neville put down the paper, met his friend's wide smile. She did it, just like she promised. Ron banged one fist on the table in a rapid drumbeat, a laugh bursting from him that sharply resembled a howl. A mix of sarcastic insult at the ministry and the idiots who read the prophet. We read the prophet too, Neville pointed out, and was summarily ignored. I wish I could meet her. It'd be nice to know someone who supports werewolves for a change. Neville raised a single brow, then shook his head with a sigh. What are your friends, then? Animals? Dean and Seamus might as well be. A quick smile. I'll let them know the change in their status. A moment's silence, the rustle of newspaper as Neville moved it across the table. The Wisengamot meets in 2 weeks. Gran's on board, already notified the ministry of her retirement. I'm going to present Viola's ideas as soon as the floor opens. The one about research and a refuge. Neville paused, raised his chin. Gran's certain I'll get seconded, especially the motion for research. She even thinks Potter might be interested. Ron sobered, shrugged, thought of the man they had last seen over a year before. I owled the map back, never got a response. No one ever sees him outside the Wisengamot and the occasional witch weekly stalker in Diagon. I don't blame him. He's stared at like a special zoological exhibit. Neville pointed out. Maybe one of a Nundu. Ron mumbled, frowning. But Dad says there's rumors he's working for the ministry. You know how it is there, everyone gossiping. No one knows anything, of course, if he is it's kept secret. Doesn't matter, Neville pointed out. He hasn't missed a meeting yet. With his support, we're guaranteed to make a statement. I won't turn down any allies, that's certain. Ron said, his smile beginning to return. It's really happening. We're doing this. We are, Neville declared and stood. Now where does your dad keep the fire whiskey? I know he hides some around here somewhere. We should celebrate. Ron grinned. At your service. The start of her first year at college was anticlimactic. Hermione found the first day dull, the first week tedious. The work was methodical, and she had already read each text in preparation. She had credit for many of her general subjects because of the advanced high school she attended, so had skipped the equivalent of a year already. But she was bored, and she did not like being bored. This professor is so tough. A girl nearby murmured to her partner, Why do we need chemistry 3 anyway? It's not like we'll be making drugs, just counting them. Idiot, Hermione thought, purposefully turning away in her seat. It's so you don't kill someone by accident if a doctor's prescription is wrong, or if you have to make a recommendation. Or if you decide you want to mix muggle and magical ingredients together to invent new drug treatments. Hermione smiled, straightened, remembered her plan. Surely, once the introductory material was presented, things would become much more challenging. The owl that arrived at Grimmauld Place was a large, bulky creature of Arctic blue, its feathers striated with the golden hue of magical protection charms. JTP, it seemed, even protected their delivery owls with the highest protection. Harry accepted the large envelope from the still creature when it elegantly extended one clawed foot, the strings that bound it to blue claws unraveling automatically at his touch. With an abrupt rustle of wings, the owl was airborne, taking flight from the railing that graced his doorway without prompting. Harry followed its light for a moment, then turned to step inside, creature closing the door behind him with a grunt. Whose owls won't deliver to a master's elf? Yellow Light grumbled, and Harry smiled. One trained not to do so, obviously. Creature sniffed at his answer. Breakfast is on the table. And with that, the elf stomped in the opposite direction of the kitchen, steps heavy with offense. Harry wandered over to sit at said table, placing the envelope that no doubt held resumes on the green wood. He spent a moment simply sitting, thinking, organizing in his mind the many branches of research and discovery alongside the current projects they mirrored. So many plans, and never a dull moment to spare. With a smile, Harry reached for the purple fork and began to eat. It was late, the air quiet and still in his laboratory. Hermione had left half an hour earlier, having spent the last few hours of their day going through resumes one by one, discussing skills and experience, before they settled on 3 candidates that seemed satisfactory. Now, she was no doubt tucked in bed to sleep away another frustrating day of classes that Harry knew she found too rudimentary. She was used to being challenged, and not happy with basic classes once more. He didn't doubt she would soon decide to test out of her current classes. She was simply too stubborn so far to do so, determined to make her way through college properly, afraid she might miss some opportunity, some information. She liked order, liked to follow a set process and plan. Harry hadn't had that problem with his own courses. He jumped from one course path to another, gathering different college credits the way he imagined a child would gather wildflowers. This one looks pretty. This one looks interesting. This one looks useful. His college advisor had given up on him. The young professor merely signed him up for Harry's newest interest and wished him Godspeed. When Harry lost interest or grew bored, he simply spoke to the teacher and dropped the class or tested out, either option satisfactory to him. College was a fluid thing, a river with many potential paths. One only had to have the time and the money to swim its waters. He thrilled in his many studies, thrilled even more when he found some way to apply it to his chosen research projects. He never stopped questioning, never found his thirst for knowledge quenched. He only kept finding new waters he wanted to taste. Vampires, werewolves, the souls they both bore, the places such souls went after death, death and reincarnation, the spinning, turning, rotating wheel of time, how another reality existed on some other plane, a reality where people grew younger, where souls forgot memories, where the old and the broken were made young and new, made into pure colors once more, innocent, beautiful. He had summoned more souls, with and without his viola. He had talked twice more with Flame, the young yet old man always forgetting the previous conversation, always suspicious, always stern and disapproving. He had failed to summon 100 times more people than he had successfully summoned. He had reached a tentative theory about that fact. It took roughly a lifetime, depending on the person's life, to be reborn. But before they were reborn, they experienced a time of pure peace. They simply float, every good thing, every wonderful thing a part of them. Some experience it together, people intertwined in death as they were in life. Others solitary, but no less happy. Yet happiness is not what they feel. To know one is happy, one must know what it is to be sad. They do not know happiness. They simply know something, something I myself do not yet know or remember knowing. Flamel's words, so enlightening, so confusing, guesses in the dark, based on touch and not sight. A description of senses that Harry did not have the ability to process. Perhaps that was what being the master of death would give him, the knowledge of something indefinable, something he could only think of as a perfect peace, the reward all souls had before they must go out into the world again for a time. It made him wonder just how humanity had learned that there was a heaven. Had it been merely a guess? Or had some ancient person managed to return, managed to tell something of what they had been during their time dead? Harry had talked to other dead wizarding scholars. Some had been as fascinated as him with the experience. Others had refused to speak of it. Others hadn't been able to. Some were violently angry to be summoned. Some sank into a deep, depressed silence. All of them asked to be returned, some right away, others after mere moments. The longest had lasted nearly half a day, speaking of her personal mysteries left unsolved, her research that had never been finished. That scholar had borne a scar across her incorporeal light. One Harry had seen was in the process of being healed, the jagged edges of her soul knitting together and smoothing out, like ripples in a pond, slowly settling into peaceful serenity. It told him something, that only the broken souls seemed able to tolerate life for long periods of time. And after all his time of experimenting, cataloguing, asking questions, he had not summoned his parents. Now, sitting in the glow of his laboratory's green walls, he let himself consider it. Let himself think of what there was to gain, what there was to lose. What would he say? What would they say? Hermione hadn't mentioned the option to him again after her first suggestion the year before. She didn't press him, knowing he knew as much as she did that time was against him. His parents would forget him, might already have forgotten him. Despite Flamel's insistence that the dead did not forget the ones they loved, the old man had also said the recent memories were the first to go. Would his mother and father remember a child they had had for such a short time, loved for such a short time? Did he want to know the answer to that question? Harry lifted his hand, looking into the dark light that rested on his green palm. The stone glimmered there, and he felt as if it stared back into himself even as he looked into its changing pattern. What was it Nietzsche had said? When you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. In this case, he looked possibilities in the eye and could not decide whether they even existed, but he was tired of asking questions without searching for an answer. Harry turned the stone, alone in the silent room, and spoke out their names, James and Lily Potter, and he watched as dark shadows burst into light and split until two souls waited before him. One, shining green light only a shade paler than his own, stepped towards him, a feminine voice delicate and longing and full of sorrow and love, breaking the quiet as a wave breaks against the sand. Oh, my boy, my baby boy, a mother's love doesn't forget. She tried to hold him. Her light pressed into his own, surrounding him for a heartbeat of time, a solid non-touch that was warm and cold at once, like the touch of ice so frozen it burned. Then she cried, and he heard her tears even if he could not see them or feel them, and her voice could not seem to settle between utmost loss and utmost joy. I love you, my baby boy. I miss you. Oh, I missed you. It hurt so much when I had to go away. Harry wanted to ask questions. The scientist in him, removed from emotion, wanted to ask, do you remember how you died? Do you remember why you went away? But Harry wasn't just a scientist, and this was the mother he could not remember, and he suddenly realized that he loved her anyway, that some part of him had never forgotten her, just as some part of her had not forgotten him. I love you too. It's all right. And he reached out to her green light, and the stone still in his hand was pulsing wildly with color, the cloak that rested upon his nearby chair echoing the emotion. For a moment of time, something bent, reality, maybe, or time itself. His hand was no longer alive, but it was not dead, and he touched skin that was not cold fire but something else entirely. Peace. Loving, loved peace. Then it was gone, and he was himself again, his pattern all too human except for the dark green light and pale green shadows that the Hallows had created within him. Lily laughed, the sound abruptly bright and unmarred by the pain of life's experiences. Held out a hand to his father, who walked forward to grasp it, his deep red soul a striking contrast to their green hues. Son, James Potter said, you are well. This makes us happy. And Harry smiled at those words, so careful confusion masked by simply joy. He didn't doubt the man was wondering how he had a son, if he did not remember having one. But the dead did not seem to question what they felt. They simply felt, as they simply existed, in death so much more certain than in life. I just want to say goodbye, that I'm okay, I'm happy. Harry paused, the words coming unplanned, spilling from some place inside him he hadn't known was there. I'll see you again, when it's time. And Harry knew that that was true, too. His parents would be reborn. He might one day be walking down a street, decades from now, and see a child who laughed his mother's laugh, who bore her beautiful, unique soul. He might meet his father when the man walked in another skin, another life, another time. Perhaps the two would recognize something in him then. Some inner sense of knowing, of belonging, of being connected across time. And it was enough. It was more than enough. After he let them go, Harry lay on his bed and let the cloak move over him, settling across him like a gentle wave lapping over his body. For a long time he wavered on the edge of sleep, locking the memory of their souls into his mind, the memory of that perfect peace, of touching something immortal and having it touch him back in a gentle, loving caress. His mother and father, who still loved him, would always love him in some ways. Sometimes the abyss was not dark and evil. Sometimes it was a wonderful thing. Sometimes you want it to look into you. With a last sigh, Harry slipped into dreamless sleep, and when he woke would notice one single defining thing. The stone no longer rested inside its ring setting. He had never put it back, never noticed what it had become when he reached through life into death to touch his mother. On his right palm, connected by threads of darkest light, the stone rested inside, and yet apart from his own pattern, as unchangeable as ever, and just as impossible. He couldn't remove it, just as he couldn't change it, couldn't make it, couldn't understand it. It simply was, and now it was part and not part of himself.